because the universe is stretching and expanding, there's a few anomalies in particular, especially 3i Atlas. There's a case that this could be an alien spacecraft that's passing through the solar system. The other thing that's weird about this object is it moves really fast. You shouldn't expect to see that one every million years or so, and yet we've caught it within the span of like 3 or 4 years of looking for these things. And so Abby's making the point that if this really is that big, it basically means it can't be natural. NASA's budget is about $25 billion a year, but of course only a fraction of that goes to building telescopes. Some people are freaking out right now.
In the science community.
We'll get into it, but there's something about black holes that are like a cheat code to reality itself. There's these holes that punch through space and time. I'd be quite tempted to throw myself into a black hole just to like see. I've heard wilder ideas sort of that way, yeah. Like say I was falling backwards and you were watching from a spaceship. Until literally the end of the universe itself, he'd be stuck there. And there are some credible reasons to believe in a multiverse as well. And the first one.
What's up, guys? Thank you so much as always for hitting this video. If you have not already, can I ask you a huge favor real quick? You just take 1 second and hit that subscribe button. It is the #1 piece of help we can get to grow this channel, and it allows us to get great guests like David Kipping here and continue to get them in the future. So thank you to all of you who have already done so, and thank you to all of you who are going to do so now. Enjoy this episode with the great David Kipping. Atlas gonna kill us? What's going on?
It could do. No, I'm not too worried. I'm not too worried. Some people are freaking out right now.
Who's freaking out about it? Like in the science community?
You know what? It's amazing. It's kind of become like this viral thing. It's actually not so much the scientific community. Scientists are definitely interested in it as well. But this one's really broken through in terms of pop culture, right? You've got celebrities tweeting about Kim Kardashian was like tweeting about 3i Atlas the other day. So you've got, people are getting all over the world are getting really engaged about it, and it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's great because when people are talking about science, as a scientist, I'm always excited about that. But we'll get into it. But there's a lot of conflating information about it as well, and so some people are panicking that their lives are going to end, and other people, maybe the scientists, are more like, you guys maybe don't need to stress out too much. So there's a lot to say about this subject.
All right, well, let's unpack it, because I know like Professor Avi Loeb has been going on some podcasts. I believe he just did Joe Rogan again to talk about this, and I haven't had a chance to listen to that and like what the overall take is. I've seen the cliff notes of it, like, oh, could it be something from another planet of another species or something? That's a little beyond me. But for people out there who don't know anything about this and just want a basic understanding minus like a Kim Kardashian tweet, what are we referring to when we talk about 3i Atlas?
Yeah, so 3i Atlas, 3i means third interstellar object. So we've detected 3 of them so far. The first one was Oumuamua, which is Hawaiian for messenger from afar. That was, I think, 2017, 2018. And then the second one, by the way, Oumuamua was the one that actually also had a bit of alien jazz about it, because you might remember, maybe you can pull it up, there was some beautiful artist impressions of it being cigar-shaped, and people were kind of freaking out about that. Like, why the hell does it look that way? Yeah, this guy over here. So the top left, for instance, you can kind of see.
And this was in 2017 they discovered this?
I think it was 2017. I mean, don't quote me exactly on that, but yeah, around 2017, a few years ago. And the shape, I mean, that's not a real photo. That is inferred. So we can't actually image it that beautifully. We can just see the light bouncing off it and reflecting. And so we can see it, the light going up and down, and you can kind of figure out what kind of shape it is. So it could either be a pancake, actually, or this. We're not sure which one it is. But either way, it's pretty weird.
Now, what is the process to discovering something like that? Like, how did they come upon this? What did they use?
So the way we look for asteroids and comets in the solar system, it's kind of hard because they move very quickly compared to planets, right? Planets are just dawdling along across the sky. So if you take an image, you're going to easily snap it. But these objects, they're moving so fast and they're pretty small. Obviously, this thing is only like a kilometer across or something. Yeah. I mean, compared to Jupiter, that's very, very small, right? So it doesn't. There's hardly any light coming off it. If you look into the blackness of space and you've got a kilometer-sized rock that's a couple of AU away from you, that's hardly anything. So these things are. They're hard to detect, and so they move fast across the sky, and so you have to kind of see these trails. So you see, okay, here's my photo, and you'll notice that there's one dot that's basically going do across the sky. Okay, and you're like, that's not a planet. Planets don't move that fast. It must be something else. You try and track it, and then you can figure out an orbit. And so for these interstellar objects, there's 3 of them now that have been found. Oumuamua was the first, and there was 2I Borisov, which was very comet-like. Oumuamua was a bit weird. It looks more like an asteroid than a comet.
Can you explain the difference for people out there?
So a comet normally means it's icy. It's like a ball of, imagine like going skiing, picking up some snow, making a slush ball out of it, chucking in some dirt from the pavement and just mushing it together. That's kind of what a comet is. It's just a dirty snowball. And so when the comets get close to the sun, all that snow boils off and you get these beautiful tails and plumes coming off them. So they're really wonderful to see when you can catch them through a telescope. Whereas a rock doesn't do that. A rock just basically stays a rock. I mean, maybe it will break up, but usually, it stays together. And then the third object, 3I Atlas, is almost certainly comet-like as well. So we've had 2 comets. The last 2 and 3 are comets, and the first one was a rock. Oumuamua. And it was a little bit surprising when we first found them because it was predicted that they should be out there. So these are things which used to be around another star. So another solar system, light years away, was giving birth to planets. And during that chaotic process of giving birth to planets, there's lots of material kicking around. And some of that material can do a close passage of its Jupiter-like planets and get kind of ejected out like a particle accelerator, basically, just get kind of swung out of the solar system altogether. And so there's presumably billions of rocks just wandering between the stars. And now and again, they will, by happenstance, happen to come close to our solar system and pass through, which is pretty wild. And when you predict how often that should happen, we didn't think we'd get anything for 10 years. We were like, maybe once every 10 years, we should get one of these things. And so in the last few years, we've had 3. That's partly because we've started to get the telescopes that are more sensitive. But even with those more sensitive telescopes, we still didn't expect to get quite as many as we've seen.
How can you even, this goes a little beyond my pay grade here. How can you even accurately or somewhat accurately predict how many you might see when you're talking about small objects, relatively speaking, compared to planets, as you say, that are coming from other solar systems that are light years away from us?
It's a lot of guesswork, to be honest. I mean, you take a lot of our guessing is based off the solar system when it comes to this. We look at how many rocks we know are kicking around the solar system. You look at the asteroid belt. There's another asteroid belt further out called the Kuiper belt that's beyond Pluto. And so you look at, how much stuff do we have in our solar system, and then you sort of simulate the motion of the planets, and you ask how often would you expect something to get kicked out. So you kind of run this calculation, and you end up with a number, and the number we're seeing is significantly higher than what we'd expect, which is interesting. But I mean, maybe the solar system there's many things about the solar system that are kind of weird, right? We know that my main job is looking for exoplanets, planets outside the solar system. And we know for sure the solar system is not a typical solar system. There's many things about it which are odd.
One.
Yeah. So our home we know is odd. So why, in the same sense, why should it be that all the junk in our backyard would be typical of junk in other people's backyards, given the solar system has so many weird things about it already? So in that sense, it's not completely crazy. But there's a few anomalies in particular. Well, about Oumuamua as well, but especially 3I Atlas, that Avi Loeb has been saying on podcasts and his blog. He's been saying, here's a list of, I think he's got 10 anomalies now. I was going through it this morning, looking at all the anomalies he's got.
Pull that up, see what he's got.
Yeah, and so on these 10 anomalies, he's saying, each of these things is sufficiently, well, maybe not in isolation is strange, but when you take the whole list of them, he thinks there's a case that this could be an alien spacecraft that's passing through the solar system.
How far away is it approximately right now? Where is it at the moment?
It's basically behind the sun right now.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's kind of unfortunate.
Is this the correct list?
Yeah, this is one of my colleagues' debunking of the list, actually, which is kind of fun. So if you
science on science crime, I like it.
So he lists. If you scroll down, he actually lists the 10 anomalies here. So if we keep going down a little bit, So here's that list.
Right,
that list there.
All right. So should I read some of these?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Let's start with number 1. Its retrograde trajectory is aligned to within 5 degrees with the ecliptic plane of the planets around the sun, with a likelihood of 0.2%. Dr. Kipping, let's put that in English.
let's translate that one.
Yeah.
So all the planets in the solar system basically orbit more or less in a disk, in a plane. So it's like a pizza pie, right? There's not stuff that's completely wonky coming out of the pizza pie. It's all in a flat pizza pie. And so if you have a random asteroid or comet come from outside the solar system, you wouldn't really expect it to happen to come in at the same angle as the plane of the planets themselves. So that's called the ecliptic. The ecliptic plane is the plane of the solar system planets. So that's a bit odd because as far as we can tell, each star is just completely randomly oriented in space. There's no particular preference in space. So that's a bit odd. However, I mean, my debunking of this a little bit would be, I'm not sure how much Avi's looked at this. I'd like to talk to him about it. But these surveys that we're doing to look for comets and asteroids, the survey was called Atlas. That's why this object's called 3A Atlas. Right. So that the telescope survey was called Atlas. And they preferentially look in that plane, because that's where most of the comets in our solar system live. So we tend to give much more attention to that region than we do the north and south poles, if you like, of the solar system. So the fact we detect an interstellar object in that direction is, in my book, very plausibly just a product of the fact we look there more often. You know, so there's a selection bias, we'd say, like a winner's bias towards looking towards that region. So yeah, for me, and also the likelihood isn't super crazy at 0.2. I know it sounds maybe to some people like that's a super low probability, but by scientific standards, there's millions and millions of 1%, 0.1% anomalies. So to me, this isn't, you know, that if that was the only thing, you definitely wouldn't be like, oh, it has to be aliens, because like, of course, something could randomly come at that angle. It's not like that has to be an alien spaceship to do that. Sure, natural stuff will also do that sometimes.
But that's why he's got 9 more.
That's why he's got 9, so we can keep going.
All right, let's go. All right, so I'm rooting for the aliens, I'm just saying. During July and August 2025, it displayed a sunward jet anti-tail that is not an optical illusion from geometric perspective, unlike familiar comets.
Yeah, so I actually had to do a little bit of research on this one, because I have to say, you know, to be clear, comets is not got my notes.
Oh, look at this.
I've come
What's
with
that,
receipts.
like a 2x4? Different kind of 2x4.
This was all I had in my hotel room, so I was like, this is going to have to do for the notes today.
Get this guy a fucking notebook.
I know. So the thing with this one is there is precedent. So normally comets do have a tail. We all know that. If you've ever seen a picture of a comet, you normally have this beautiful long tails come off it, like Halley's Comet or something, with these beautiful long tails. So this has got when we first started taking photos of it, it had a tail going in the opposite direction, right? So which is kind of weird. And so, yeah, that was what Avi's pointing at. So he calls it the anti-tail, because it's like it's pointing the wrong way. So what is this tail? Maybe it's worth sort of highlighting scientifically. So the tail, remember, this is a ball of ice. So as the object gets closer and closer towards the sun, it warms up, and that causes some of this ice to boil off, and that makes water vapor and carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide. All these gases come off, and that forms what we call a coma. So it's like a little atmosphere around the snowball as it warms up. And then just because the sun itself produces a wind, it's kind of like blasting it. It you know, like putting a hairdryer in your long hair, it would blast it backwards, right? So that's why you get the tail.
Did you know that there's an online cannabis company that ships federally legal THC right to your door? And that this company has found a way to combine THC with carefully selected functional ingredients to target nearly every mood and health concern you can think of? The company I'm talking about is Mood.com and their incredible line of functional gummies. And today, you can get 20% off your first order at Mood.com using promo code Julian at checkout. That link is in my description below. Forget one-size-fits-all supplements that only get you high. Mood's functional gummies are optimized to kick in as little as 15 minutes and take you directly to the mood you're looking for. Whether that's Mind Magic Gummies for deep work and creativity, PMS support to ease cramps and balance mood swings, or their Sexual Euphoria Gummies to help you feel ready for action and turn every touch into a full-body experience. Listen, you can find gummies to just get you high pretty much anywhere these days. But Mood's functional gummies combine premium, federally legal THC with targeted botanicals to help you get into the perfect mood, usually in as little as 15 minutes. And everything ships discreetly right to your door. No dispensary lines, no awkward conversations, just better days and nights delivered to your doorstep. Best of all, not only is every Mood product backed by a 100-day satisfaction guarantee, but as I mentioned, our listeners are going to get 20% off their first order at Mood.com using promo code Julian at checkout. So head on over to Mood.com, link in our description below, find the functional gummy that matches exactly what you're looking for, and let Mood help you discover your perfect mood. And once again, don't forget to use promo code Julian at checkout to save 20% off your first order.
So the reason why there's an anti-tail is kind of curious, but it's not unprecedented. There are two other objects, at least I could find. C2014 was a comet that has an anti-tail, and there was another one called Kowutuk that has in 1970s has an anti-tail. So we've seen this before. It's not completely crazy to have an anti-tail, and it's possibly a product of the fact that if you're really far away from the sun, and actually when we've been taking these images, it is really far from the sun. It's beyond the orbit of Mars when we've been imaging this thing. And normally we don't look at comets until they're really close to the Earth.
So it's obviously closer to the sun than we are, but
Yeah. So no, it's beyond Mars. So when we were first on Mars is the next planet further out in the solar system.
Oh, that's right.
So it's a little bit beyond Mars, so further out. And we were imaging it really intensely because everyone was fascinated by this object. And we saw it has this kind of anti-tail. But we don't normally image comets that far out. It's kind of unusual to take photos of them that far out. It's just because this one's a pop star that everyone's kind of fascinated by it.
Kim Kardashian.
Yeah, exactly. So the solar wind at that distance is way less. So it's like putting your hairdryer down from mode 3 to mode 1/2, right? So there's hardly any breeze hitting your face anymore. So the fact is all this stuff evaporates off, but there's not much to push it anymore. And so it's not surprising that on the side facing the sun, there'd be more stuff because that's the side that's boiling, right? That's the side that's getting baked by the radiation of the sun. So therefore there would be more stuff there. And that kind of looks like the anti-tail. So
it looks like it. It might not necessarily...
Well, it kind of is, but it's just, it makes sense because that's the side that you're baking in the sun. So of course there'd be more stuff on that side than the opposite side. And it's only when you turn the hairdryer up, the solar wind up, that you start getting the beautiful tail at the back end. So I think we can explain that. I don't think you need to say, it's also kind of weird to say that's aliens because like why would an alien spaceship do that? There's no like, I don't understand why an alien would produce these kind of weird anti-tails. That's kind of strange.
Right, because we don't have, you were showing me the imagery of, I forget what it was called, but the first one that they found in 2017, which you said could be like a pancake or
a cigar.
Or a cigar.
Yeah.
But that's a generated image from what we think it might look like versus what we have actually seen because it was impossible to photograph. So we're dealing with the same problem here to where we're looking at what we think it might look like with 3i Atlas versus what it actually is.
It's even kind of, well, we can image this thing, but it's hidden because, so it has the two properties of a comet are that it has a coma, which is this atmosphere of crap coming off it, and then it has the tail, or an anti-tail in this case. It also has a tail now as well, so it has both of those things. So the actual, what the comet itself, what we call the nucleus, the actual snowball, that's buried so deep inside these extra layers of stuff coming off it that we can't see it. So we have these nice photos. The Hubble Space Telescope's looked at it. James Webb Space Telescope's looked at it. There's many amateur photos of this object that have been taken.
Amateur photos as well.
Yeah, people. If you have a 14-inch telescope at home, it's fairly big, but you can buy those online. You could take some really nice images of this thing right now. It's more once it pops out behind the sun, a bit easier. So we've imaged it, but all of these blobs you can see, like on the top right, for instance, on the Wikipedia page there. I think that's taken by professionals. That one, I think, from ESO, European Southern Observatory.
Yeah, is that enough to be able to tell? Like this is where it's definitely beyond my pay grade. Like when you just see like kind of the blob and you can't get like a full texture to it or anything, like can you guys be like, okay, this is how we can identify comet versus rock and etc.
Well, if it was a rock, it wouldn't have any of that. You can see the tail is pretty clear, and it's just gigantic. It's this huge cloud of gas that's coming off it, and you can even tell what that gas is made out of. So if you take that light and you pass it, it's like white light, but you can pass it. White light contains all the colors of the rainbow. So you can pass it through a prism and it splits it up. And then if you look at that light, you'll see there are some colors that are missing. And the colors that are missing are indicative of particular molecules which absorb those colors. So that's how it's called spectroscopy, and that's how we can, it's on the Pink Floyd album. So this is how you can figure out what stuff it's made out of. So we know that this object is made of water, it's made of carbon dioxide, or the gases coming off it, water, carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide. And those are like what all comets do. So it looks, everything about it looks very, very comet-like in that sense. So I would say, maybe we can move on to other anomalies, but I don't think this one is particularly slam dunk.
All right, number 3. Its nucleus is about 1 million times more massive than, how do you say it again? Oumuamua?
Oumuamua.
One Oumuamua.
Yeah.
And 1,000 times more massive than 2i Borisov, while moving faster than both altogether with a likelihood of less than 0.1%.
Yeah, so the challenge here is the mass estimate itself. That's what obviously in this blog by my great colleague Jason Wright. People should really check out this blog if you're super interested. Yeah, just Google Jason Wright, Wright with a W, W-R-I-G-H-T. He's a professor at Penn State, and he's been providing the counterweight to Abby in popular discourse on this. So I'm glad to see this have some debate on this.
Yeah.
And he's pointing out that, this calculation is really difficult. Like, to weigh a comet is non-trivial, right? So the only way normally in astronomy we can weigh how heavy something is by gravity. That's what gravity does. Gravity is all about mass. So if you want to measure how heavy is Mars, let's say, you use the moons of Mars. The moons of Mars, Phobos and Deimos, go around and you see how far away are they from Mars and what is their orbital period. We do this calculation in my class for the students and for undergrads. So I won't put you through the pain of that calculation.
I remember that one from physics, actually.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So you use Kepler's laws, and when you use Newton's version of Kepler's law of gravity, you can basically figure out the mass. So if there was something in orbit of this comet that you could also monitor, then you could get the mass of it. But without that, it's really difficult. It's not heavy enough to disturb the orbit of the Earth, right? It's this tiny snowball. It's not going to move the Earth. It doesn't have enough gravity to do that. It's not going to move the sun. It's not going to move any planet. So it doesn't really have any influence on the solar system gravitationally. So then how are you supposed to get the mass? So the way Avi's been trying to do it is to look at how much mass is it basically losing. So you can see all this gas coming off it, and you can try and figure out how much weight that would have given the amount of light it's absorbing, basically, these rainbow effects, these spectroscopy effects. And then from that, you can kind of try and back engineer what the mass, therefore, of the object must be. But it's a really tricky calculation. It requires a lot of detailed physics of thinking about the sublimation rate and the carbonyl interchange between these different molecules on the surface. So it's a really challenging calculation, and Avi's really just in a back of the envelope thing. So he's probably ballpark not 1 million miles away, but it's not how planetary scientists do this calculation. So Avi's not a planetary scientist. He's an astrophysicist, same as me. And so neither of us are really experts on that calculation. And you talk to the planetary scientist people, and they're just rolling their eyes at this calculation. They're saying that's not the way we do it. It's completely wrong to do that calculation that way. And really, they just don't believe this mass. They know it's losing mass, but they just don't believe the mass calculation here is correct at all. So I think there's some debate here about the fact, right? So he's claiming this as a fact. It's 1 million times more massive than Oumuamua, and they're saying, hold on, we don't know that for sure. Maybe it is, but we haven't established that, and some people are saying it's way less than that.
It is crazy how the smallest differences, though, in weight and what the size of something, what that can mean and how it orbits, and then how it could affect a planet. Like when people talk about the end of the Earth, you could have a comet that's I'm going to make up numbers, but instead of 1,500 light years away, it's 1,400 light years away, and that's the difference between we live and we die.
Yeah,
you know. So when you get into these calculations, if he's going outside of his bounds on something like that, I guess that's 0.3 right there, number 3 of the list of 10. That can make all the difference in the world if he's slightly wrong about that. It totally.
And the reason why he's pulling on this string, he doesn't explain it in that bullet point, but if you do this kind of calculation of, we talked about this calculation earlier, what do you expect to be out there? Normally, even if you scale it up to correct for the fact we've seen more than we have, you'd still expect there to be more small stuff than big stuff. It's the same reason, if you kind of take a biscuit and you crumple it up, there's going to be more tiny crumbs than big chunks left over. And it's the same with rocks smashing into each other in solar systems. So there's going to be tons and tons of small stuff, hardly any big stuff. And so Abby's making the point that if this really is that big, it's too big. You shouldn't expect to see that every million years or so. You'd get something that big pass through the solar system, and yet we've caught it within the span of 3 or 4 years of looking for these things. So it would be so freakishly large that it basically means it can't be natural.
Don't they also have estimates on how old this is, or how far it goes back? Or am I thinking something else?
Yeah, kind of by proxy. So this object is super old, most likely, but it is a statistical argument. So the fact the other thing that's weird about this object is it moves really fast. So it's way faster than the other two. It's moving at 60 kilometers per second when it first entered the solar system, which is way, way faster than any of the planets or stuff we have in typically it's like 20 to 30 kilometers per second. So this is like a factor of 2 or 3 faster than typical stuff in the solar system. And we think that speed, very roughly, of these objects should correlate to their age. And the reason being that the older something is, the more time it's had to pass by other stars. So the galaxy's moving, right? The stars are jumbling around, moving from place to place. And this rock could have encountered not just one star, but 2 or 3 or 4, could have had many encounters, maybe not as close as it's had to the sun, but each encounter gives it like a little speed boost, like a gravity assist, basically. That's what we do for the spacecraft in the solar system, these slingshots around the planets to get more speed. So this thing could have picked up speed through its journey through the galaxy. And you'd think, therefore, its speed means it's old because it's moving so fast. So it's definitely a hand-wavy statistical argument. You can't say, oh, it's exactly 8 billion years old, but it probably is about that old. So that means the solar system is 4.5 billion years old.
It's older.
The galaxy is about 13 billion years old. The whole universe is about 14. So it's over half the age of the universe in age, most likely.
How do we know the age of the galaxy, approximately?
Yeah, that's a great question. We know the age of stars. Aging the galaxy itself is not really possible, but you can age all the stars that you have in the galaxy. And then since a galaxy really is just a bucket of stars, by proxy, that you can kind of use that to say how old the galaxy itself must be. But it's also a little bit of an ill-formed question to even ask how old a galaxy is because it's constantly changing. So our galaxy is not the same galaxy that it was 5 billion years ago or 6 billion years ago. It has been eating other galaxies, and it continues to do so. There's 2 small satellite galaxies around us called the Magellan Clouds, which we're probably going to engulf at some point. There's the Andromeda Galaxy, which is the nearest major galaxy, and that's on a collision course with us. So in, I think it's about 5 billion years or so, these 2 galaxies will hit.
And what happens when they hit?
Yeah, so you might wonder, like, our stars can like smash into each other and like, it's just going to go crazy. But the galaxy is extremely diffuse. So that, the typical distance between stars is just vast. So the probability of any 2 stars actually colliding is really small. There's actually a calculation, again, that undergraduates often do to sort of convince them of this, because you might think, no, surely something's going to smash if you have 2 galaxies come. Right. But they basically just pass through each other. But the gravity tugs them back. So they kind of like go through each other, and then each time they oscillate back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And eventually they just kind of become one new galaxy. And we call that Milkdromeda. Huh. Milky Way Andromeda. So we predict there will be a Milkdromeda one day.
That'll feel like an earthquake here.
I don't think we'd even know. I mean, the sky would look spectacular because you'd literally see another freaking galaxy in the sky being shredded to pieces, but we wouldn't feel anything.
Oh, that's interesting.
And we wouldn't be here anyway. I mean, this is 5 billion years in the future, but
if someone, gone by then.
Yeah. I mean, the sun won't last that long, to be honest, but anyone who is around then, it would be pretty awesome to witness. So yeah, aging galaxies is hard, but we do know that our galaxy is probably very mature, not too far off. The seed of what became the Milky Way, the proto Milky Way, is of order of about the age of the universe almost. Yeah.
And that, because it's interesting that you said, I believe it was like the galaxy's approximately, we estimate 13 billion years old, and then the universe itself is like 14 billion.
Yeah,
which, a billion years is a lot, but when you look at like the percentage, like you're talking about something that's over 90% the age of the universe itself. That's pretty crazy because we don't even know how many galaxies there are out there.
Yeah, I mean, we don't even know how big the universe is, right? The universe could be infinite as far as we can tell. We can see a certain distance, and we're just not sure. Maybe it just goes on and on and on forever. So we can count how many we can see in our local volume. It's really limited by the speed of light, right? So if the universe is 13.8 billion years old, you can only see something in principle that's 13.8 billion light years away. We can actually see a little bit further than that because space itself stretches. So because of that stretching of space, we can actually see out to about 45 billion light years away. But that light that we are seeing, this is what the James Webb Space Telescope's all about, is seeing light from literally the very first stars and galaxies that were being born in the universe. And those objects are, it doesn't matter. You could build a telescope that's 1 million times more powerful or larger than James Webb, and you can't see back past that point because that's limited by the speed of light itself. So it just could go on and on and on. So
the James Webb telescope is fucking wild to me.
Yeah.
What that can, the fact that human beings invented something like that can see. I mean, the images are insane.
Yeah.
That you look at. I mean, as an astronomer, that's when they came up with that, you got to be thinking to yourself, holy shit, right?
It was such a gamble in so many senses as well. Like if it didn't work out, it really could have been very difficult for NASA to recover from it and for astrophysics to recover. The telescope is very complicated, right? It's I think it has over 200 parts that have to unfold when it went into orbit. And it's not orbiting the Earth. The Hubble Space Telescope orbits the Earth. So that's why astronauts have gone up there, I think, 4 times and fixed the damn thing. Every time something goes wrong, we can go up there, we can fix it, we can replace a part, we can upgrade it, we can refuel it, do all that stuff. This thing is so far away. It's about 4 times further away than the moon is. So no human has ever gone that far into space before. And I think people have concerns about whether a human being could even survive that journey and go out and come back. So there's no intention or plan or even there's nothing on board the spacecraft itself that even allows a human being to service it. There's no like panel you can open for astronauts to handily fix something. It's not designed to do that.
So it's just set it and forget it, basically.
Yeah, so you have to make sure you don't screw anything up, right? Because if any one of these 200 moving parts when it unfolds goes wrong, it's stuck. So yeah, maybe you could Google like James Webb unfolding. Or JWST unfolding, yeah.
Yeah, I just look through the imagery it captures sometimes.
Yeah, and you can see like it was packed up like on that middle right panel. You can see like it would go down one, the second row, and then the right.
This one?
Yeah, so you kind of see this kind of sequence of images where the way it launched was like it was on the left there. It was kind of like folded right up. In fact,
it came out like TARS a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it was like it was designed to be like stuffed into the Ares rocket which launched it, but it wants to get into this full unfolded size. So it had to do all of these complicated maneuvers. All these actuators had to push it open, and if any one of those steps went wrong, we just wouldn't have a telescope. And it was almost $10 billion. So this is why it's such a big risk for NASA, right? Because if it took NASA's budget is about $25 billion a year in total. I think it's been cut now under the new administration, but it's normally about $25 billion a year. But of course, only a fraction of that goes to building telescopes, right? Like a tiny fraction. So the budget for telescope building each year is probably of order of like a couple of $100 million or something. So if you're going to build a $10 billion telescope, that means it's going to take you 20 years of like committing all of your resources
to just this one.
Yeah. And so astronomers like me and many astronomers were kind of pissed with James Webb a little bit because we had other ideas. We were like, hey, I want to build this telescope, or let's try this thing. And they were like, no, sorry, we've got no money for that. Everything's going to James Webb. And it was like that for like 20 years. So it was kind of annoying. So like, well, what if this thing doesn't work out? I mean, it's amazing, but it kind of like tied our hands. It's putting all of your eggs in one basket.
Right.
And if that basket breaks, you're in deep shit.
Now, what were like some other ideas of other types of telescopes you would have wanted to develop that were different than Hubble, obviously, I assume?
Yeah, there's lots of ideas of like doing smaller telescopes, looking in different wavelengths. So when there was a recent call for like big ideas for new telescopes, and there was 3 or 4 ideas that were proposed. One was to actually take photos of planets, called the Habitable Worlds Observatory. So that would be fantastic because James Webb, it can take photos of planets, but only really big planets and planets which are like basically forming. So when a planet is first forming, it's really bright. It's very hot. It's like a lava world almost. And so there's all this heat coming off it. And so James Webb can detect those. But if it was the Earth around the sun and it's a mature system like we are, it can't see those. That's impossible. So you need one of these more sophisticated telescopes specially designed to do that. So that was one idea. Another one was to look in totally different wavelengths of light, like X-rays. So build an X-ray super telescope. We've had small X-ray telescopes and they've been amazing. But if you build a big X-ray telescope, you can see stuff like black holes merging. You can see the center of galaxies. You can see these active galactic nuclei where all this stuff's flying into black holes. You can see quasars. So X-rays let you see like the most extreme stuff happening in the universe, like all like the high energy, extreme need for speed type stuff. That's where, when the universe is on steroids, that's when you want to go to X-rays. You see all this wild stuff.
Why
happening.
can that do it versus like the James Webb Telescope can't do that kind of thing?
It's to do with the wavelength of light that it looks at. So we see in visible light. So it goes from about 400 nanometers to about 700, 800 nanometers. That's a very narrow range. If you could see further into the red than we can, then you'd see the infrared. And that's what James Webb looks at. That's a longer wavelength of light. And so Einstein taught us, and quantum mechanics shows us that there's a very strong connection between the wavelength of light and the energy of the photon itself. So it's basically proportional. So the longer the wavelength, the less energy that photon is carrying. And so that means that the source that created that photon was a low energy event, right? So it was a warm planet. It was the surface of a star. Comparatively, we consider those kind of low energy environments. Yeah. Whereas if you go towards the left and you go towards shorter wavelengths, you go towards the ultraviolet. That's what obviously gives you a suntan. If you go even more extreme, you get into X-rays. That's obviously so energetic it passes mostly through your body, those rays. And so those photons carry a huge amount of energy. And so the only way to make such an energetic photon is that it has to be like two stars collided, or like something's falling into a black hole, or
that's
a black hole.
That's why you were saying when black holes collide, I can see that.
Yeah, you get all this wild high energy astrophysics happening. So X-rays are a probe to that most extreme end of the universe. So it depends what your interests are. I mean, those folks had a really good case, but obviously they can't do anything to do with planets, nothing to do with light. That's got nothing to do with life or aliens or anything like that. That's just to do with understanding the universe better. Whereas James Webb actually wasn't really interested in planets either. Its goal, the reason why it went to the infrared, is because it wanted to look at the very first galaxies forming in the universe. So a galaxy normally produces light in the visible, like we see. That's why we can see stars. But because the universe is stretching and expanding, if an object is really, really far away, billions and billions of light years, that light gets stretched out by the expansion of space itself. And so that light that used to be blue light becomes red light and then infrared light. And so the only telescope that could see the first stars in the universe would necessarily have to be an infrared telescope. So that's why James Webb was built. That was really its goal, was to see the very first stuff happening.
What happens? I'm a little fixated on the black hole thing, because one of the amazing things about the movie Interstellar is that when we later actually got to look at that came out in 2014, when we got to look at a black hole in 2019, 5 years later, it looked frighteningly similar to what Christopher Nolan had created, which is just kind of crazy how that worked out. But like when you say two black holes are like going to collide together, what does that even mean? Like, what does that look like?
So all stars evolve. As they get older, they change, and the sun will not evolve into a black hole. It's not big enough to fall into a black hole, but the biggest stars will. And a lot of stars are in binary star systems.
Wait, the sun's not big enough to fall into a black hole?
To become a black hole. It won't fall into itself.
I was going to say, I saw Matthew McConaughey fall in one of the last fall in the sun.
Right, so you could push the sun into a black hole, but if you leave the sun alone, it will not become a black hole.
So I'm bigger than the sun.
Good impression.
I worked on that one.
Yeah. We don't think that's going to happen to the sun, but some of the biggest stars will do that. And lots of the big stars actually live in pairs. They kind of, our sun's pretty lonely, but a lot of stars are binary or even trinary. So they mess around. They're not monogamous.
That's right. They're polyamorous.
Yeah, exactly. Polyamorous stars. They have their swinger parties out there.
That's right.
And as they evolve and get older, these stars eventually slowly kind of spiral in towards each other. And there's various ways that can happen. There's lots of people studying exactly different mechanisms that can happen. But generally, we expect this to happen. So as they get closer and closer and closer, these binaries will merge eventually. And when that happens, we get these like ripples through space-time. So it's not really light. There is some light effect as well, but primarily the main effect you see or hear is a ripple in space-time itself. And so that's what these gravitational wave detectors like LIGO have been so successful at. So we've detected something like a few hundred merging black holes by hearing them merge together. And what's really wild, we have a new faculty member.
We can hear it.
I mean, it is basically a sound wave propagating through space-time.
You just hear like black hole just got sucked up.
Yeah. I mean, it is actually technically possible because it shifts space, it bends space, and that's what a sound wave kind of does. It compresses air. So it causes a compression wave. So it is possible that you could, if you were near one of these events, you could actually hear it with your own ears, which is really crazy.
Nuts.
Even in the vacuum of space. So they say in space you can't hear anything, but if you're near a merging black hole, certain configurations, you would actually be able to hear those frequencies. Yeah. I think my colleague Jan 11 told me that, and I was like, that is wild. I love that. Oh my God. So it is literally like hearing the universe, these effects. So it's a completely different way. I mean, for 400 years of astronomy, we've just been using light, X-rays, photons, it's all light. Whereas this is like radically different. This is like ripples that you're feeling in space itself. So that's been pretty mind-boggling, and what's really crazy is that if we keep doing this, if we build even bigger versions of these detectors, these telescopes, they're kind of like a telescope, these gravitational wave detectors, they can be in principle so sensitive that we could detect every black hole merging in the entire universe. There wouldn't be a single black hole merger that we would not be able to detect.
In the whole universe, when we don't even know the size of it?
What I mean is the visible, the universe that light has time to reach us.
Got it.
Obviously, if light doesn't have, because gravitational waves also travel at the speed of light. So they travel the same speed the speed of light does. So obviously, if it's beyond what we call the particle horizon, it's beyond the observable universe. Obviously, nothing can travel faster than the speed of light, so we're not going to see it or hear it. But anything within the observable universe, there could be a black hole merging right at the very boundary, and we could, in principle, build detectors with the next generation of observatories that would be able to catch every single damn one of the things.
Hey guys, if you haven't already subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. It's a huge, huge help. Thank you.
What's the relation of time there, though? And here's what I mean by that. 100 years passes here on Earth, but if something exists fucking 12 million light years away or something, is the same, this is getting to kind of the interstellar plot too, is the same amount of time 1 second there. Like if we're detecting something with black holes, like you were just talking about, that's happening way over here, and it takes 200 years to develop here on Earth, is it really just taking a totally different form of time, longer or shorter, to actually develop out there? And how do we know that?
Yeah, I mean, it depends where you put your clock. So we've got one clock here on the Earth, but where's this other clock you're putting? Exactly. Is it, because you say like put it in the system, but if you put it, the closer and closer you put it to the horizon of the black hole, the slower that clock will tick. And eventually, as it's on the event horizon itself, it will stop ticking. So if you watch someone fall into the black hole, like say I was falling backwards into the black hole and you were watching from the spaceship above, going, have a good time, watching Matthew McConaughey fall down, he would actually seem to slow more and more and more as he got closer and closer. And from his perspective, that's not happening. In his perspective, he just falls straight through. But from our perspective, watching him fall, he would seem to slow down more and more and more. And he'd also get redder and redder and redder, because the wavelengths of light now have to, it's kind of like a gravitational, well, it is literally a gravitational well. It's like a hill. And so the light now has to climb out of that hill. And as it climbs out the hill, it's like it's losing potential energy. And so it shifts. It's called a gravitational redshift. It shifts from, let's say it was blue light coming off his helmet, it shifts towards the red by that same effect we talk about with the expanding universe. Yeah. So he would look redder and redder and redder, and fainter and fainter and fainter. And eventually he would almost go invisible, be far redder than our eyes can see, and completely freeze on the surface. So you would never actually witness him past the event horizon until literally the end of the universe itself. He'd be stuck there from our perspective.
But it's not what happened.
But from his, I mean, we don't really know what happens inside the event horizon from his perspective. That's where physics kind of breaks a little bit.
That's crazy though, that like you're telling me I could physically like take a clock that's moving, and when that clock itself, when I'm getting close to this hole, it slows down to like a stop.
Yeah.
It sounds like a DMT trip.
You're right.
It doesn't even sound real.
It's
So the clock
DMT
knows
trip.
like, oh, he's near a black hole. Stop ticking.
Yeah. There are so many questions about, I mean, we know pretty well what we'd expect to happen from our perspective. And the mystery I always think about is, what does Matthew McConaughey experience? Like what does he see from his perspective? And if I was given the choice, like let's say you're like, you've lived your life, you're 75, 80 years old, and you're like, okay, I've only got a year or two left to go. I'd be quite tempted to throw myself into a black hole given the option, just to like see, because it's like a one-way trip. You can never tell anyone what you see. Once you go through that event horizon, there's no way you can ever send information back out. So what you know is for you and for you alone, and you would be the only human being, the only individual who would ever actually know what happens inside a black hole.
Now, what if our bodies here are just containers of the soul, which some religions posit.
Yeah.
And when you die physically, your spirit actually, it turns out, we figured out after death, passes through something like a black hole to some other side or some other dimension or something like that. Perhaps you might, and I'm totally like riffing right here, but perhaps maybe you would experience something similar to what the actual, like, oh, I'm 75, I got a year or two left, let me just fucking send it and fall into a black hole.
I've heard wilder ideas for what happens in the afterlife. I'll put it that way. Yeah. I mean, it's, they're kind of the, there's something about black holes that are like a cheat code to reality itself. They are a break in the rules of the universe itself, where, there's these holes that punch through space and time. And all of our questions about, one of the grand goals of physics is to try to unify quantum physics, which is a theory of the very small, with general relativity, the theory of the very large. And at black holes, those two worlds meet. And it's pretty much the only object we know of where both of those physical effects manifest in meaningful ways. So, there's this paradox with black holes called the information paradox, which is like, what happens to stuff that falls in? Quantum theory says that you can't delete information. So I'm sort of paraphrasing it a little bit, but essentially it's like every process is reversible. You could like take an egg and you could smash it into a million pieces and crack it on the table. But in principle, we could, if we wanted to, like put everything back together and make the egg again. You could undo it. Every process should be time reversible in quantum physics. But with a black hole, it's not time reversible. When something falls through that event horizon, like we said, that's it. It can't come back out. So there's another way of saying that is that you've lost information. The universe has like erased, it's deleted information that the universe once had. Unless it was a textbook with, a biography in it or something. All those words, all that information is gone forever. And quantum physics just can't handle that. And so a lot of physicists are thinking really hard. This is why it's a paradox. It doesn't make any sense. There must be a way for that information to somehow get back out. And one of the ideas that seems connected is that Stephen Hawking had this brilliant insight of something called Hawking radiation. We now call it, he didn't call it that. We call it Hawking radiation. You're a bit of a jerk if you call something after yourself.
Right. Yeah,
I named
you gotta
this
wait till you
Kipping
die.
radiation.
Yeah.
But yeah, he got called this afterwards. But he basically showed through, some quantum arguments that you should expect black holes to evaporate over time.
To evaporate.
They don't last forever either. So the kind of the cartoon way to understand this is to imagine that a pair of particles pops up into existence, which happens all the time. Even in this room right now, in empty space, there's constant virtual pairs of particles popping up. And antimatter and matter pop up and immediately annihilate each other so fast that we don't even really have time to see it. And quantum physics says that happens all the time. And it's very well understood and observable. So this should happen on the event horizon of a black hole. So you've got this boundary. Everything on this side falls in, everything on the other side can escape in principle. And a pair of particles could form right in that threshold. One of the guys falls in and the other guy has the opportunity to potentially escape. And if it escapes, it is basically removing energy from the black hole, because that pair of particles was like a loan. It's like borrowing money from the bank, and so somehow now that dollar that you loaned has escaped.
Yeah,
and
you
so
take it away.
the black hole has to lose that dollar, has to decrease in its mass to accommodate for that. So this Hawking radiation effect causes black holes just very, 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 very slowly lose mass and evaporate, which is interesting then from the perspective of what happens if you fell in. If time really does get massively distorted, you could in principle observe this speed up effect of seeing your own black hole that you're inside evaporate whilst you're in it and disappear.
Is there also maybe I'm totally misinterpreting this with the example you just gave, but is there also like a Schrodinger's cat type idea there where there's two possibilities of what happens to the same person, meaning they fall in or they escape?
Well, not exactly in this analogy, but you could imagine experiments like that. You could certainly imagine having you'd have to have some kind of random 50-50 quantum coin that's like, okay, 50% of the time, this rocket's going to blast you into the black hole, and 50% of the time you're going to stay inside this ship. And then, then you could have these quantum superpositions set up where you're both inside the black hole. And that's a really wild idea, actually. I've never heard of the Schrodinger cat thought of with black holes, but I could imagine having some fun thinking about the consequences of that.
I don't know. I'm bringing the loop back to when I was talking with Michio Kaku a couple years ago.
Yeah,
he was blowing my mind with dimensions, and I'm wondering if there's like some sort of relation there, because he's like, we could sit in this room and turn the transistor this way and a dinosaur's there, or we could turn it this way and it's you and me. And I'm like, fuck, so that means there's like trillions, gazillions, billions of possibilities that happen. So maybe if you look at a black hole, you would also have all those possibilities with the same person. And now it gets into like, well, are black holes the key to time travel? It gets really weird. It gets way beyond me.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of disagreement about how to even interpret what quantum mechanics is really telling us with these kind of experiments like Schrodinger's cat. So to recap, Schrodinger's cat is that you have a cat in a box, and it's a closed box that no one can see inside of, and there's some like poison or something inside, and there's a random particle that's going to decay, and there's a 50-50 chance it will decay in, let's say, the next hour. And if it decays, it will trigger this poison to release and kill the cat. And if it doesn't decay, the cat's alive. So in quantum mechanics, we would say that particle that causes the decay, until we observe it, it truly isn't a superposition of both decayed and not decayed. And it doesn't collapse into one particular case until you actually, start observing it. And so therefore, by extension, shouldn't the cat also be both dead and alive? And so that's really mind-boggling to think about. And then you might say, what happens when someone opens the box and now the lab guy can see it and he's like, okay, the cat's alive. But then you could also say, well, the room that he's in, there's now two versions of that room, one where he opened it and saw the cat, and one where he didn't. And so then this kind of like bubble of reality kind of expands across the universe. And so, causally, it just goes out and out and out. And so there is a view that Sean Carroll often holds this view, the whole universe itself is in a giant superposition of all of these different states. And this kind of lends itself a little bit towards a view called the multi-world, Multiverse Everettian View. There was a physicist called Hugh Everett that put this worldview forward, the many worlds hypothesis. And it's kind of like Sliding Doors, that movie where like if you miss the train and don't miss the train, both of those things actually do happen. And all of these realities are playing out side by side. So there's essentially almost an infinite number of you and me having this conversation in just kind of different quantum realities that we can't interfere with in any way.
Just in one 3-hour conversation, think about all the possibilities of like the first sentence, you say this word instead of that word. Yeah. And then in the next iteration, it's like, well, the second sentence is not,
there's just the number of possibilities just rapidly balloons. So the weirdest thing I've ever heard about this, it kind of creates a philosophical problem called the quantum suicide experiment.
Quantum suicide experiment.
Yeah. Maybe a better name for it is quantum immortality. I think some
I like suicide. It's good.
Yeah, suicide. Sometimes people get a bit upset about it, but the idea is, imagine you took like a revolver, and you'd have to be pretty pathological to this. I do not recommend anyone try this experiment.
Don't do this at home.
There's a good chance this is wrong. But if you follow the quantum physics forward and you believe in this Everettian view of the universe, if you tried to shoot yourself with a gun in the head, then there is a chance that gun will not, will malfunction or something. Something will go wrong with it.
Do not try this at home.
Yeah, do not try that at home. Or stand in front of, stand on the road and a truck's about to hit you or something. There's a small chance that truck will get a pop tire and miss you, like in kind of Final Destination type universes, right? There's like all these like weird things that can happen where you actually miraculously survive this situation. So there's millions and millions of yous, and 99.9999% of them get killed in this experiment. But there's a tiny, tiny fraction of them that miraculously survive. And the idea is like, what is conscious experience? Conscious experience is a continuous flow of reality from moment to moment. And so you can never observe being dead. You can't be one of those dead things because there's nothing to observe. And quantum observation is all about someone there to observe it. So you can only observe yourself as one of these live individuals. So the idea is that you could, take this revolver and do this like 3 or 4 times in a row, and you would survive. And if you did that, you could prove to yourself that this theory was correct, because the probability was so tiny, it would just be miraculous. But in the the reason why we don't know of anyone who's ever done this is because the vast majority of these universes, you would die.
Right.
So if your friend said, I'm going to try this experiment, he's just going to kill himself. That's what's in our reality. But in his conscious version of reality, he wouldn't see that, and he would continue to experience life. So he just keeps going. And then you can apply this also to aging. So, if you die by, getting cancer, or you just die because your heart stops when you get old or something, again, there's a small chance that heart keeps beating another beat. And so you have this quantum immortality possibility where it's impossible for you to die, but you can get sick and you can get injured. And so you can become this really decrepit, bedridden, tortured experience where
it's impossible to die?
You can't die in this quantum immortality.
So if I blew my brains out, I still would live.
The gun wouldn't go off. Yeah.
Oh, it just wouldn't even go
off. The
off.
gun would go off, or you would like blast a piece of your skull off, but somehow you'd still be conscious or survive the experiment.
If I got to run off a cliff, I just float.
Well, you'd slip before you got there or something. Like something would always stop you from doing these things. Yeah. Or like I don't know, like an eagle would nudge you into the cliff face or something. Like every time something weird would happen, it seems incredibly unlikely. But like in Deadpool, there's that character Lucky who just keeps getting away with all these crazy things. So the quantum immortality, it was come up by Max Tegmark, and a lot of people say like this is so crazy. It kind of proves, it's so ridiculous, it kind of proves there must be something wrong with this view of quantum mechanics. It can't be right because it just seems stupid that everyone could like keep surviving forever. But the Everettian view is actually the most popular view, I'd say, or one of the most popular interpretations of quantum mechanics there is. Because
when did he come up with it?
I think it was like the 1950s or 60s. Okay. So he actually believed, rumor is Everett believed he would never die. Yeah.
Like die according to our laws of dying, or
in his reality he would never die. Okay. So obviously we would observe him die because we live in a different dimension in a sense to him, but in his dimension he would continue to live forever. But it's not a pleasant thing, right? To be it sounds great at first, but it's like a deal with the devil, because then like you don't really want to live forever decrepit and unable to do anything.
Yeah, that's a strange thing thinking about life. I was talking about like the concept of heaven with someone the other day, and why I actually think, something like reincarnation could really make sense, because it sounds awesome to go somewhere in the sky for all of eternity after a quick trip here. You do a good job and then you get there and you can fucking eat chocolate and never get fat. You run a 40/40, no problem. You're all around people you love. You drink, you get drunk, and you're never hungover. Like, it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
But it's all good.
Yeah.
And then you don't have, there's no like, maybe you're just totally enlightened at that point, but there's no like struggle. There's nothing to make the good stand out from the bad. So the idea of doing that infinitely is crazy. Similarly, the concept of like living life and knowing I'm never going to die would take away the whole kind of meaning and purpose of like the clock of life here and what you're supposed to try to accomplish while you have whatever time you have. So in some ways it goes against our, little pea-brained ideas in humanity to even understand or be able to appreciate something like that, like not dying, because it takes away from the whole meaning of us living in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a huge Tolkien nerd, so J.R. Tolkien, who wrote Lord of the Rings, and the elves don't die in that world, right? They just live forever, And it's pretty strange to like compare the way the characters behave in those stories. The elves are just sad like all the time because they just want the world to be the same, and they hate things changing. Like when the seasons come and the evolution of the mountains and see rivers change, humans emerge, all this kind of stuff. They hate all that. They just want things to be this, like, just keep it the way I'm used to it. And eventually becomes like a really kind of tragic existence to have this prolonged life. And eventually, they do kind of go to like a heaven essentially in the story, which is Valar. But the humans have much more impetus about them. They're like, hey, I've only got 100 years. I need to get this shit going. Like, I'm not just going to sit around messing around. I do wonder though, because there's people like what's his name? Brian Johnson. Thank you. Who's trying to extend his life significantly.
You see him take a mushroom trip the other day?
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, he's trying to live a little bit.
Okay. I'm glad to see him pushing the boat out a little bit on that side. Yeah, that's good for him. I do think it's interesting, like, what would happen if we lived, maybe not forever, but 500 years? How would human perspective change about things like climate change? A lot of folks are like, I don't give a shit about climate change because it's not going to happen for another like 200 years before the world's screwed over. So why should I give a shit about it?
Right.
If we live for 500 years, that's now like poisoning your back garden in your relatively short-term timescale, right? It's like, why would you invest in your retirement fund? It's because, sure, it's a few decades away, but you're going to live it. You're going to experience being retired one day. So you want to put some money in your 401k because that's going to happen. So in the same sense, like if you live for 500 years, I wonder if as a society, we might mature a lot and think, I think we're so short-term focused as a society.
That's interesting.
A longer-term view might actually be really beneficial.
Yeah, but you're also talking about like a middle ground there too. It's not like we're going to be immortal for fucking, a million years or something. But, if you lived 500 years, you'd think a little bit more about the timeline in front of you. And I agree, because it's like, especially in America, we think about tomorrow or like today. You look at other cultures around the world, some of them, they think 300 years out or something like that. Obviously, it's more rare these days, but it's like when you're talking about something with the climate and like the health of the planet just in general and like our place in this universe, like that is a human issue. It's everyone around should care. But then you have all these borders and stories basically of countries that are all different and have different opinions and different cultures and different people. So you can't get everyone to agree on something. Yeah. It's like, do you think we can have something? Maybe it's not that, but is there even would it take something like people knowing that fucking aliens exist or something for human beings to suddenly have a moment where we come together and go, oh, wow, we should all care about that because that affects all of us equally,
Yeah. I was talking about this when I was on Joe's podcast as well, because there's like a double-edged nature to humanity, right? That we're competitive and tribal with each other. And that's to a fault in a way, right? Because sometimes being so tribal and wanting the other team to lose is not net good for humanity, right? Wanting to destroy your enemy, especially if it's like in sports or something, we often get like so worked up about wanting to crush your opponent. And that's very human that we feel that way. But if we act that way in society, you're just making other people's experience worse, and those people could go on to do great things. So it's net bad for humanity, I would say. But being competitive also drives us to be better, right? So if you're competing in the Olympics against some super fast swimmer, you're going to train extra hard to try and get to the top of your game. So I do kind of wonder with alien civilizations, if they don't have that tribalism that we have, that competitivism, maybe they never become technological because they're just not driven to sort of the peaks of what's possible. And if they are competitive and tribal, maybe their fate is to ultimately destroy themselves, because that seems like a distinct possibility, at least for humanity, that we could end up in some kind of giant World War III or something one day. Yeah. So it might be like a double-edged sword, that the only way to become advanced is the same way which ultimately limits your lifetime.
All right, real quick, I gotta go to the bathroom. We're gonna come back to number 4 and start going through the 3-eye atlas list. I didn't forget, people. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. So I like the side tangents off this list because obviously we're explaining 3i Atlas and everything, but I got a lot of questions about the universe, like all of you out there, I'm sure. But we left off at number 4 right here. We just done number 3, going through a couple of the other ones that have been observed. But number 4 on the 10 anomalies that Avi Loeb had is that the arrival of 3i Atlas was fine-tuned to bring it within tens of millions of kilometers from Mars, Venus, and Jupiter, and be observable from Earth at a perihelion with a likelihood of 0.005%. So let's go to those hotel notes right there.
Yeah.
What do we got going on?
Yeah, so this one actually is really easy to debunk because one of my strengths is statistics. I love statistics. I teach that at Columbia, and this is a statistical argument, so we can get into that. So the Comet is making a pretty close approach to these 3 planets, Mars, Venus, and Jupiter, but those are not the only planets in the solar system. So if you do the calculation differently, you said, okay, what about how close it's getting to Mercury, the Earth, and Saturn instead? You get basically 50% probability times by 50% times by 50%. So you get 1 in 8. So it just becomes like not a big deal at all that this is the situation. So it really is subject to which planets you pick. So let me give you an example. You could apply this to human beings.
Okay.
So what is the probability I'm an alien, right? So you could look at weird things I'm doing and say, that's a bit anomalous. David does this weird thing. That's a bit anomalous. So I'm going to show off a little bit, but what my best lift, so I think I see the day. My best lift at the moment is 2 plates for about 5 reps. And apparently...
Pretty good. All right.
Yeah, there you go. Apparently only about 0.5% of the world's population can do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe I'm a super strong alien that's just like hiding in human skin.
You're in the wrong room to be saying that. You're scaring me.
Right, so I know this. You're probably even more extreme, you guys.
He's
but
like gonna be the fucking Men in Black guy coming.
Could happen. You never know. And then let's say there's a 0.5% probability then that I'm alien by that definition. And now what is it? I also have a weird accent, right? I talk with a British accent. Only about 1% of human beings speak with a British accent.
Makes you sound smarter.
Yeah. So maybe I'm an alien who like couldn't figure out how to talk proper American, and
that's right.
And this is like the best I can do to like pull it off.
Do you have an American accent?
No.
You can't do it.
I can't do it.
I have a shitty British accent. So if that makes you feel better.
There we go. I'm not gonna do accents. But if you multiply those 2 probabilities together, 1% being British times by 0.5% of being able to lift 2 plates, then you'd get the same probability hit, 0.005%. So
wow.
It's just all you have to do is just take a couple of things about yourself, like your blood type and like maybe some genetic condition you have or some ailment that you have. Multiply those 2 probabilities together, and you can like trivially get down to this percentage. So if you take the object and just look at its history and say, there must be something about it that's a little bit odd. It's really easy to back engineer like these crazy low probabilities. And again, like if you just take 3 of the planets, you get a much more mundane number than this. So this is just what we would call p-hacking in statistics. P-hacking. So this is a p-value technically. It's not actually a likelihood value in statistics. We say this is a p-value. P-value is when you ask like how surprising something is. So it's a measure of surprisingness. If you engineer these numbers very carefully, it's called hacking, p-hacking, and it's banned in most journals in science to do this. You're not allowed to do it because it's been shown over and over again, especially in nutrition and health. There are so many studies that do p-hacking to say like, hey, if you eat 3 tomatoes a day, you'll get rid of all your cholesterol or something.
Oh yeah, Jesus Christ!
And there's tons of p-hacking going on in those studies. So this is like it's just not legitimately even allowed in most scientific journals anymore. So I think this one's pretty easy to kick out.
I see stuff every day where it's like new study says, and it's like ridiculous thing. And it's like, oh, I guess everyone should just do that now, and you're fucking healed. It's crazy. But if that number, so it's 0.005. If that number had said 0.000000005, you might be like, oh, okay.
It depends on how you do it, because I could just keep adding things onto the look at lift 225, British, blood type. I don't know, the fact that I'm right-footed. You just keep adding like more and more stuff. My eye prescription's 3.25. So you just keep adding stuff on, and you would end up with ridiculous probabilities. It just depends on how much you engineer it. So a p-value alone isn't meaningful. If you really want it to do something surprising, it's got to do something unnatural. It's not unnatural for an object to pass near to a planet. That's not unnatural. Right. If it came to a full stop, if it just went and just stopped in space, went backwards,
that's not natural.
Then we'd be like, hold on, that is freaking weird. That's not. There has to be a ship. I would agree with Avi then. That has to be a ship. Yeah. It is not doing any of that stuff. Everything it's doing is what asteroids and comets do.
Okay. Number 5, its gas plume contains much more nickel than iron, as found in industrially produced nickel alloys, and a nickel to cyanide ratio that is orders of magnitude larger than that of all known comets, including 2I Borisov, with a likelihood below 1%. All right, let's take that out of Japanese.
Yeah, so it's when you do this spectroscopy of these objects, we talked about the different molecules you can detect coming off it. So we know there's water coming off it, which is obviously very typical of a comet. There's also tons of carbon dioxide and carbon monoxide. Again, totally normal for a comet to do that kind of stuff. And another kind of trace, there's trace metals which come off as well. So there's iron and nickel and other things. And the ratio of nickel to iron is super high. So that's kind of odd. It's producing tons of nickel and hardly any iron at all. So that was the anomaly that Avi's talking about. And that is genuinely quite weird. We haven't really seen any comet. There's no known comet or asteroid which produces this extreme ratio that's been observed for this object. However, we observed it at kind of a weird time. It's pretty rare that we observe comets this far out in the solar system. It's just because this is like the celebrity object. We've been giving it so much attention. So it's possible there's actually a ton of objects we've just not been doing this for that it does this. The other interesting thing is if you look at the papers of these detections, they've been monitoring it all the way from an AU, by the way, is a unit of distance. That's the distance from the Earth to the Sun, 1 AU. We've been monitoring this comet from about 3 AU into about 2 AU and measuring how much nickel it's got all the way along that journey. And what we're seeing is that it started out really extreme and it's getting more and more normal as it gets closer and closer in. And the prediction is actually, as it gets closer to the sun, it will be indistinguishable from other comets, the ratio. So again, this kind of speaks to the fact we caught this guy so early that it looks weird to us, but that's maybe just because we don't normally observe things at this part of the journey. And as it's gone closer and closer to the sun, it actually looks indistinguishable in terms of its nickel emission. So it's pretty hard to like really know how anomalous this truly is, because it's the very nature of our observations on it are kind of anomalous. How much attention it's got is anomalous. So the deeper you dig, you get all this extreme, finely grained detail, but it's not obvious whether these things are true for other comets or not. And the other thing is, this is obviously the third interstellar object. So there's only 3. There's really only 2 other objects to compare to, if you're being really honest about it. So to say it's got an extreme nickel compared to solar system objects, but it's not a solar system object. So why are we even like really comparing to that anyway? We know that exoplanets are freaking weird compared to the Earth's, the solar system planets. So why would we expect comets from other star systems to look the same as comets we have here? There's no reason why that should be so.
By the way, you had said this earlier, but it was just coming up in the context of what you were explaining there. When you talk about 3I Atlas entering our solar system, so it's within the same galaxy, but it's coming from a different solar system, which is effectively coming from a different star system. So another equivalent of the sun somewhere else. How does that happen? Does it just float in, or is there something that needs to happen for it to be able to leave another solar system and come to ours? I'm thinking like, are there gravitational pulls working against it? What's the science there?
Yeah, I mean, we know there are ways of ejecting stuff out of the solar system even. The solar system most likely probably had a 5th gas giant when it was really young. So there's Jupiter, Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, or Uranus, Neptune, really, in that order. But there was probably another ice giant, so another Neptune, Uranus type object in the solar system. And the reason why we think that is because if you simulate the planets and like let them, orbit around super fast, you speed up the simulation, very often Neptune gets kicked out of the solar system altogether through gravitational interactions with Saturn and Jupiter especially. So the way to solve that problem, because obviously the Neptune's here, is to add another gas giant, and then that guy gets kicked out, and that saves Neptune and Uranus. So we think even in the solar system, we probably ejected not just tiny rocks, but entire planets out the freaking solar system. So there are literally rogue worlds drifting between the stars, which might even have moons, and even maybe there's life on those things. It's pretty wild to think about. So there's definitely ways that can happen. Another good example is Triton around Neptune. So Triton is a moon which goes backwards around Neptune, which is kind of weird.
Yeah, why does it go backwards?
Well, for a long time, people were like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, if it's forming, it should form as the planet forms. It should spin in the same way the planet spins. None of this makes any sense. But then this brilliant astrophysicist, Craig Agnall, came up with a mechanism to explain this. And you basically have two, like a binary object. So you have Triton, and it has another body next to it. And these two objects just orbit around each other like a binary. And we know of loads of binaries like this in the asteroid belt. So there's this binary that swings closer and closer towards Neptune. And then what's happening is, at the moment of close approach, Triton is on the inside, and it's moving at almost the same speed as Neptune. So they're kind of like, it's like two cars down the highway that are moving at 70 miles an hour and 71 miles an hour. You can kind of look through each other's windows and see each other, and it looks kind of slow. And so that means that Neptune can gravitationally capture the moon and grab onto it. Whereas the other object is going the other direction. So that's like the car going the opposite highway direction. That's going 70 miles an hour in the other direction. So that's doing like 140. So that thing just gets slingshot super fast and gets kicked out of the solar system altogether. So this mechanism, we think, explains how you can form some of the moons, including Triton. So there are probably these binaries which also kick. So maybe 3A Atlas, maybe Oumuamua used to be in a pair, and they got too close to another planet, and one of them became a moon, and the other guy got
they split?
chucked out. Yeah, that's a pretty easy way of making these. Yeah,
right.
We don't know for sure, but that's one easy way of doing it.
When you talk about, I believe you said it was Neptune, when we run these simulations, could be kicked out of the solar system. How long, like, let's say we notice one day, oh, they're getting kicked out, and you can see it's like point of no return. How long does that simulation take for it to actually leave the solar system? Are we talking days, years, hundreds of years?
Millions and millions of years. Yeah. So, I mean, these speeds are very slow. So, I mean, it's going a similar speed to Voyager 1, Voyager 2. And it would take Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, I think, something like 100,000 years or so to reach like the nearest star. So these are very slow speeds, but the galaxy is very old, so there's like plenty of time for these things to make their way.
And then within another thing I was just thinking about, within our solar system, obviously, like, there's planets that we're trying to figure out if at some point we could reach, but they're so far away. Are there definitive cases to be able to say that, not necessarily aliens or something like that, but there's some life on Jupiter, for example? And how do we know that?
It depends what you mean by on Jupiter, because Jupiter doesn't have a surface. So like, what's the on mean? It would probably have to be like hanging out in the clouds, right, just like floating around. And people have speculated about that. Scientists have speculated about that. I think Carl Sagan actually thought about that quite a bit and was, wondering there could be life in the clouds. It's been suggested for Venus, that's true. So a few years back, there was a detection of a molecule called phosphine in the atmosphere of Venus. And on Earth, phosphine is pretty much only made through life, through these, happens on like bays and shorelines. There's this bacteria. I think it gives that truffle smell. Actually, no, that's DMS. It's like, so anyway, it's a molecule which is made by bacteria, and it was found in the atmosphere of Venus. And it turns out, even though Venus is like a hellhole, the surface is like 700, 800 Kelvin, so extremely hot. It's like an oven on the surface. So there's definitely no way you'd expect life to be on the surface. But as you go up and up and up, there is a certain layer where the pressure is similar to this room and the temperature is similar to this room. So it's possible there could be bacteria which are just wafting along in the clouds. It's a little bit challenging how they stay up there. Like, you need, do they propel themselves somehow, or is there wafts that just sort of keep them afloat for their entire life cycle? I mean, it's a little bit speculative, but in principle, the conditions are right, and phosphine was detected, so people got excited about that. So I think people are, scientists are open-minded about that possibility. It wouldn't be your first bet, though, right? Because there's moons like Europa and Enceladus, which have like liquid water underneath their surface and plumes and organic molecules. Yeah. So we know, obviously, on the Earth, the oceans are full of life. So if you've got a giant ocean underneath these moons, it seems like that would be a more obvious place to find life, since we know for sure that's a place where life can survive, rather than saying, hey, the first place we should look is the clouds of Neptune, because you require like two or three miracles for that to work out. Right. Whereas you only require the same thing to have happened on Earth to have happened in these moons. So I think when we sometimes the public get frustrated with scientists, like saying, "Why do you guys only care about Earth-like planets?" And it's not that we're narrow-minded. We don't think about life in strange places, like on the surface of neutron stars. Even people have speculated. Even the galaxy could be a living being. Scientists have speculated about that. The entire galaxy could be an organism.
Being.
Yeah, that is
like the last scene in Men in Black. Basically.
Right. Yeah. So scientists have very wild imaginations. Trust me about what is possible.
That's good.
But it just wouldn't be if you're going to prioritize. Hey, here's $10 billion NASA's got to look for life. You have to, it's like stocks and bonds. Like, okay, maybe you put like 1% into your Bitcoin or something. I don't know what your portfolio is like, but you're probably going to like put, some of the money in like the high risk stuff, but not all of it. And then most of your money probably lower risk investments. It'd be kind of radical to stick all in like the highest risk thing possible.
You're trying to stick it to what you could relate to. Like a human being, like you said, couldn't live in like a cloud-like atmosphere. They got to live on something that has somewhat similar resources in a way. So that's where you're going to look. It makes sense.
Yeah, and it's similar for stars. It's similar for planets. So yeah, we got to look at least. The chances are good to look at places where we know for sure life was successful.
Yeah, I don't hear nearly as much talk from like Elon and other people these days about the whole colonization of Mars. For years, that was like the thing he would lead with. Always talk about it. Where are we with that? How realistic is that over the next 300 years?
I mean, dude's got $1 trillion now.
That's what I'm saying. It's like you're telling me about the telescope costing like 10 billion or something. I'm like, buddy, come on.
Yeah, he could easily do that now, right? He's got enough money to do that. I mean, there's a technological challenge which obviously he's trying to solve with Starship. Starship has had like a bunch of launches. I'm not sure how many they're at now, maybe like half a dozen or so. Each one they seem to be making progress, but it's been a difficult nut to crack, I think, for SpaceX, as to get that to be a fully reusable vehicle as they imagine it to be. And even if they get that, obviously to go to Mars requires all these extra steps like refueling in space.
How would that work?
So I think the plan is to have like a tanker version of Starship that just launches and it's just full of fuel. That thing orbits around the Earth, and then you have another Starship comes up, which is like the crewed version, and then they dock in space, and it dumps all over the fuel to the other guy. And then once it's in space, once it's in orbit of the Earth, it's a little bit less energy now to go to Mars, so it's easier to go. So you can't do it in one shot, I think is true. Like Starship with a crew and all the infrastructure it needs, it can't do it in one shot. You have to have a refueling. So I don't think there's any plans for Starship to test that in the near future, as far as I'm aware. So there's still like a lot of stuff they have to prove. But I mean, I'm in favor of it. I think it'd be great. I really would love to see humans work on Mars in my lifetime.
Right.
I don't want to do it, but I think I'd love to see somebody.
It'd be nice to die on Mars, right? You go there. That's this where it ends.
I don't know. It's like, would you want to die in Antarctica? Because Antarctica is a lot nicer than Mars.
How so?
Well, Antarctica is it's about roughly the same temperature as Mars. It's not that different in temperature, but it has atmosphere. There's hardly any atmosphere on Mars. It's very, very small atmosphere. So if you took your helmet off, you definitely suffocate pretty quickly. There's no oxygen to breathe. And then on top of that, there's water. There's tons and tons of water in Antarctica. You just melt the ice and you got water. There's hardly any water on Mars. It's really difficult to come by. There's a little bit in the polar caps, but it's a much more challenging place to survive than Antarctica. So I think that's a good point of comparison. And humans do live in Antarctica, but not all year round. It's like they'll stay there for like 6 months. It's like astronauts on the International Space Station. Like, yeah, you'll do a stint, but
don't sign me up.
No one wants to live their life in Antarctica.
I'm good.
What kind of life is that? So,
unless they have pyramids underground, I've heard.
Oh yeah, maybe there's pyramids on Mars. Who knows? I mean, it'd be cool to dig up Mars and see what's going on under the surface as well.
That's a good idea.
Space 2001: Space Odyssey. That's in the moon. They find the monuments, right? So there could be. I mean, I'm actually a big proponent of that. I think I'd like us to do that. I think we should build structures underneath the surface of Mars and the moon for future aliens to find. Yeah,
little reverse engineering here.
Yeah,
from what we're used to.
My pitch is that this is the most likely way that we'll have communication with another civilization, a non-human civilization.
But the pitch is that it'll be after we're gone and dead.
Yeah. So it's not two-way communication. it's one way. It's the same way that the pyramids are a form of communication, right? There's hieroglyphics written on the surface, and you can decode it, and they're a monument to their brilliance, right? To these pharaohs, and so it is a message which has been sent through time, and we can't reply to that message, but we can learn a lot from that message. So if we're going to have two-way communication with aliens, it requires them to be contemporaneous with us, right? They have to be A, nearby because of the finite speed of light, and B, they have to also happen to have emerged at about the same time that we emerged, and not be so far behind us that they can't use radio, but not so far ahead of us that they don't give a shit about us. So they have, there's a lot of like coincidences you require to have two-way communication. So maybe that'll work out. I'd prefer that, but it might be that one day we come to the realization that's just not going to happen. Like, we've surveyed the nearby planets, there's no one there. The only option we have is to leave a message, to leave a time capsule for someone to discover one day.
Couldn't that be destroyable though too? Like, we always look at New York, and this could all be just completely gone and no recollection that any of this existed, right? So if you're building some, whether it's a pyramid, whatever it may be, some sort of monument, and your idea is, I think you said, to build it underground or something like that, what's to stop, a core event in the event that the planet fucking explodes from destroying all that on the way to rebuilding itself as a new planet? No,
you're exactly right. And that's why I said Mars and the moon especially, and not the Earth. The Earth is a terrible place to do this. This is one of the advantages of going to these other planets. The Earth has weathering, right? So if you calculate how long New York City would last for if we went away, it's of order of a few million years, and then there would be a trace of it left at that point. And you see that with like Chernobyl, right? There's, if you look at Chernobyl after that nuclear accident, there's already nature is like taking over.
Right.
Maybe you can grab some photos of that to show it, but you can see all these like trees and wildlife just kind of encroaching back onto that city. So I don't think there'd be any trace of humanity, whatever we try to do, after say 100 million years.
It's like I Am Legend, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It all just kind of goes away. So the moon, though, is completely different, because the moon doesn't have an atmosphere, it doesn't have rain, it doesn't have wind, doesn't have any geology. There's no earthquakes. There's like very tiny lunar quakes there, but there's no volcanoes. There's nothing to like destroy anything you leave there. And so it's often said that Neil Armstrong's footprints will last there for millions of years. And that's just a footprint in sand.
The footprint will?
Yeah. Just the imprint of his boot will last for millions of years. How long will the Apollo landers last on the moon? We don't even know. We're trying to calculate that in my team right now, actually, with a science project on that. But it will plausibly last until the sun engulfs the moon. The sun will one day get so big it engulfs the Earth and the moon. And that will happen in about 5 billion years. So probably that stuff will be there long, long after we're gone. And an alien, it might stumble across the moon. Because the thing is with the Earth is like a beacon for other aliens. So let's say there's an alien on the other side of the galaxy right now, 100,000 light years away from us. But they could build their own James Webb, maybe a super James Webb, and they will be able to see the Earth, and they'd say, look, we can tell this planet has oxygen. We can tell this planet's got oceans, it's got land, we even probably could tell it's got people on it eventually. But even because of the light time travel effect, they'd be able to, they'd be looking back at basically 100,000 years ago. So maybe they wouldn't see civilization, but they'd still see that we have a rich biosphere. So they would know, here's the galactic map. This guy right here, the Earth, the solar system, there's something special about this guy. There's life on it. There's like stuff happening on this planet. And not just simple life. Oxygen is a sign of complex life. So they would know this is a unique, interesting planet. I mean, this is like a good reason for alien tourism. If you were an alien tourist, the Earth, I think, would stand out as like, this is one of the best places to go in the whole universe.
Why is oxygen in particular viewed that way for complex life?
Yeah, so oxygen is a product of photosynthesis. That's the only way it's made on the Earth, at least. So this is, it took the development of cyanobacteria and plant life to lead to this. So that only happened about 2.5 billion years ago. And before that, for the previous 2 billion years, we just had simple microbial life that was basically living off chemical gradients. And that's like much easier to do from a like internal machinery perspective of life. To develop photosynthesis was a pretty big deal for life. And it took a significant advancement. Once you've got oxygen in the atmosphere, it was possible to have much more metabolism inside cells. So you start to see the development of eukaryote cells, which is really what we are. We are eukaryotes. And that allows for much more efficient energy production once you've got oxygen. So once you've got the energy, you can do more stuff. You can then animals start to develop, and multicellular life starts to develop about 1 billion years ago. So all of that, is likely, we think, conditional upon having an oxygen-rich atmosphere. So that's a good sign that there's something interesting going on here. So I think an alien 100,000 years, 100,000 light years away would look at the Earth 100,000 years ago. They'd be like, something's going on here. Let's send a ship. And it's going to take that ship probably, unless someone has a warp drive or something, it's probably going to take them a damn long time to get over here. We're probably long gone by the time it gets over here. But they would maybe be able to detect something we leave behind. Or maybe this happened 3 billion years ago. Maybe 3 billion years ago they looked at the Earth, and sure, there was no oxygen back then, but they could still see probably there was life on the Earth. They would detect life and be like, hey, maybe in a few billion years, some smart creature might develop on that planet. We're not going to be here in 3 billion years. We're probably going to be dead by then, but let's send something over for those guys. That's the best way for us to communicate. So there might be a time capsule, a beacon, which is really obviously the plot of 2001: Space Odyssey, hidden in our solar system. And the best place to put it would not be the Earth, but would be underneath the surface of the moon, because you'd be protected from micrometeorites. There's no weathering, there's no volcanism. So that would be the perfect place. And there are caves on the moon. These are lava tubes. So when the moon first formed, there was a little bit of volcanism when it was first forming, and it left these caverns as lava flowed underneath the surface. So there's these like cathedral-sized tubes underneath the surface of the moon, which if we seal those off, by the way, that's a perfect place for a moon base, because then you could have atmosphere in these tubes.
Maybe we have.
Maybe someone's done that. Maybe that's what Musk's gonna be doing. I don't know. I'd love to see a moon base do that. And yeah, that's like a super trivial place to put something, because you literally just drive down the hole and dump something there. You don't even have to dig around. And we haven't explored those things at all. So to me, that's very exciting. Like that, if I was thinking logically in our current day and age, what is the best bet for me to if I want to maximize the probability of detection of something for us, that something could be found by an alien species, that's what I would do. If I build a radio beacon, that's a crappy suggestion, because that's only going to last 100 years and it'll break at best, right? It's not going to last that long. So you need something that can not require an active power system, that can somehow be an information-rich beacon in a obvious place that an alien might look.
Yeah, it's like I was here.
Yeah.
We're gone, but I was here.
Yeah.
Now, they're talking, maybe, I hope I saw this right. I forget who it was, but one of the guys, not at NASA, but in the government, talking about space exploration, was talking about last week, like going back to the moon and how they're planning that and whatever. And when you talk to like all the people who don't believe we went to the moon, I do, to be clear. But
I think like Kardashian doesn't, by the way.
Oh, she doesn't.
She's
She's on that train now.
That's what I read, that she's now a moon truther. I think they call themselves. Yeah.
She went all in. Good.
Yeah.
Well, the one thing, like when they'll bring it up, that is quite interesting, is the fact that we went in '69 with people. Yeah. And we haven't gone since. What is the logic? Because I would think like the rock that orbits in our system right there, we would want to know everything about that, even if we're not going to like colonize it or something. Like there's resources we can definitely get out of exploring that and being there all the time. Obviously, we take pictures of it and scans and everything, so we know stuff. But like, why haven't we gone back?
Yeah, I think this is more politics and economics than science, right? So there's lots we can learn about the moon scientifically, but you don't necessarily have to have humans there to learn that. And we keep sending rovers and satellites there. We've been doing that ever since the Apollo era. So we've certainly been sending stuff there, just not human beings. Right. But why politically don't we do it? I think obviously the space race is a big part of it. That's why we went. It wasn't. Yeah, the reason we probably put boots on the moon wasn't for a scientific experiment. That's not what Neil Armstrong was actually there doing.
Say we did it, motherfucker.
He was there. He was there for prestige, right? It was to show off that, hey, we can do this shit and you can't, or we can do it before you. It was flexing. And once we'd flexed and we'd done that a few times, what was the point of staying there? I mean, we'd already established we're the top dog at that point. There was the Soviets had given up on their moon program. They never put a man on the moon the entire time. By the time we'd put like 13, astronauts walked on the moon. So there was nothing more to prove. And it costs an absolute bomb to do it, right? It's so expensive to fly to the moon with very, very little. Well, there's no economic return really of flying to the moon. You bring back some moon rocks and you can throw those on eBay and try to make enough money, but it's not really paying the bills. So it is a desert, right? So it's very difficult. If we discovered, here's a counter universe and this multidimensional universe stuff. I always love to think about this. Imagine if the moon was just a little bit bigger than it was. It's about 1.25% the mass of the Earth, I believe. So 1% the mass. Now, 1%, it's because it's so low mass, it doesn't have enough gravity to hold onto an atmosphere. That's why it's a vacuum, basically, when you walk on the surface. But if it was, say, 10% the mass of the Earth, which is about the mass of Mars, it would be big enough to hold onto an atmosphere. And so it is and then it's in the habitable zone, right? Now it's a world which has an atmosphere, which is the right distance from the star to have life. And the Earth has water delivered likely from comets, we believe, that comets smashed into the Earth and delivered all the water. The moon would have got that same delivery system, would have had that same Amazon Prime delivery of all that water lying on the surface. And so everything would have been there for it to have had life. And so Neil Armstrong, you imagine this alternate history, Neil Armstrong sets foot and he doesn't need an astronaut suit. He's setting foot in shorts and a t-shirt and he's still on a beach. And imagine how different the next 60 years of history would have been had the moon had been a habitable world that we could just basically move into right away. Real estate the size of Africa, the landmass about the size of Africa. So it would have totally transformed society. So if that had happened, I'm sure we would have been going back to the moon constantly. But if it's just a dusty desert of moon dust with very little, economic value for us, it just comes down to money. There's any point doing it.
It also feels like when you look over the last 5-6 decades, I'll just speak for this country more than anything, but you could probably say this in different places around the world. The interest for a while there waned in space. It wasn't the same. Like back then it was like, oh my God, we can go to space, that's how it should be in my opinion. I fucking love space. Yeah. But if there's one really positive thing about Elon getting so involved with this in his adult life is that as you've seen him become the celebrity over the last 10, 20 years, him talking about it all the time has people thinking about it a lot more, people interested in it again, which would make sense now with even something like the moon that lacks the resources for you to want to spend the money to even go there. But it's like, if you have more interest and you have more economics from the private side pouring into this space, well, fuck it. You could go to the moon too.
Yeah.
It is fascinating though, when you consider you could have a planet like Mars that maybe down the line you could actually put humans on and they could live there, as opposed to what you said about the moon. Like that's what makes that a little bit more, I don't know, sexy to go look at. Yeah. But the moon tunnels you were saying, like those caverns that they have, you said there was some sort of volcanic event?
When the moon first formed, it was just a big ball of lava. It slowly cooled down. There was still some active volcanism for a while. But yeah, there's when you look at the moon, you see there's these light patches and dark patches. Mm-hmm. Maybe throw a picture. Just photo of the moon. So all those dark patches are lava flows. They're called Maria. So those were ancient lava flows that happened, like 4 billion years ago. And then was they covered up these cratered regions. There was probably, when the moon first formed, like tons and tons of rocks just smashing into it like every day. And that's why there's so many craters on the moon. Mm-hmm. The Earth, of course, would have had the same thing, but it's all weathered away by now. But the moon doesn't have that weathering process, so that's why it's covered in craters. But the dark patches are where lava came up from the surface and smothered up over those craters, filled it in. And so, that's a direct evidence that we have that the moon did once have lava flows. And then from sounding experiments and mapping from these satellites, we can see there's evidence for these lava tubes that are underneath the surface. So they're totally unexplored. What they really look like, we don't really know, but I think it'd be super exciting to go there. I think what's really wild about the moon is that it's like it's a bit like simulation theory kind of stuff, mm-hmm. but it is wild that we have the moon and Mars. It's almost like if you were playing a game in Space Race game or something, you would want to have an object that was close enough that you could do it with 1960s technology, But if the moon wasn't there, we probably would never have bothered developing as much rocketry as we had. The moon is only a 3-day ride with 1960s tech, and you can land and you can do it in 1960s tech. That's kind of crazy. But now to go to the next step, to go to Mars, is much, much harder. But still, it's a rocky planet. Imagine if it was another Jupiter.
Right.
Or another Venus. We can't land on Venus. Venus will crush you immediately the moment we step onto the surface. Mars is like an ideal next stepping stone. If you would like to design a game to try and like nudge the player through a tutorial mode of like, learn how to do this, and then you can do the next thing, and then you can go to the stars, you would put the moon here, and you would put Mars there, and you wouldn't make it too easy. You'd make it challenging enough that maybe like having the moon be truly habitable would just be too easy. So you wouldn't really like push yourself hard enough. So yeah, I do kind of think it's wild because the moon is weird. We have the biggest moon in a relative size sense out of any planet in the solar system. It's it's a quarter of the size of the Earth.
Could we like send, I mean, you talk about these unexplored, basically like tunnels in a way. Is there a way for us to put a satellite up there that gets into the atmosphere of the moon, and then, you run some little drones down into those areas and take video?
Yeah.
Or am I thinking that far too simply?
Yeah, I think maybe you can Google like moon lava tube robot, and people have thought about putting like these snake robots that can.
That's what I'm saying. Like, let's do it. Let's go fund this. Like, crowdfund it or something.
Yeah,
I'm in.
Maybe you can't find it, but yeah, I've seen these cool visualizations of different robots that we could put down. It is a tricky. So obviously, you can't put a rover down there because it's a pretty steep descent to get into them.
This is China, but
China's doing it. Oh, now we got it.
Yeah, well, different countries obviously have different ideas about exactly how to explore these caves, but someone's going to do it. And yeah, maybe there used to be the X Prize, the Google was it Google X Prize, or which was like, we'll give you what was it, like $10 million or something for the first person to land on the moon and take a photo. And someone won that prize. Someone landed on the moon, took a photo, and beamed it back to the Earth, and they won this X Prize of maybe it was $100 million. It was a ton of money.
Oh wow.
But yeah, maybe we could like get, I don't know, Elon or someone else to say, he's got a ton of money lying around, to say, look, I will give the first person to send photos from the inside of one of these lava tubes $1 billion.
Right.
And that will spur like a huge bunch of these teams to try and get the investment to develop it.
What is the cooperation like these days among countries, be it NASA and some of the other space programs of other countries? Because we're dealing with something that doesn't have a border. I'm just using the moon as an example right now. Forget Mars even. But like, it's uncharted territory. Someone doesn't have to get permission from someone else to go there because no one has like legislative authority over it. So how do we even organize, and what is the organization, I should say, of like trying to figure out some of these space missions these days between countries?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of collaboration, but I'm not sure it's going in the right direction at the moment. So you look at James Webb, and it was launched by the Europeans, for instance. So the Americans built it, the Europeans launched it. You look at, and then a lot of that, a lot of telescopes, there is some parts of it are built in Europe or Japan, and they're shipped over, and we put it all together, we assemble it, maybe in the US, and launch it. And there's lots of, Japanese missions which share data with us. There's, again, lots of European collaboration. I think China and Russia, maybe there's less certainly way less scientific collaboration. Because there's more, obviously, politically of a tense situation there with those nations. But historically, that wasn't always true. I mean, the International Space Station has had plenty of cosmonauts on board as well as astronauts, and they don't fight. They get on well. Like astronauts,
that's good.
Yeah, everyone gets
no
on.
cops up there. Right. So
there's no one punching each other, as far as we know, in the International Space Station between these nations. So, but I mean, astronauts are picked to be like, that's part of their training, is to be like, you're not gonna pick someone who's an asshole who's gonna fly and be a jerk in the space station, right? You want someone who's pretty easy to get along with to be up there. I mean, so that's a big part.
Picking Matt Damon in Interstellar, basically.
Yeah, right. He's a bit of a jerk. Yeah. You don't want someone with like a really annoying habit to be like up there. I really like making this sound. You don't want that guy with you for the whole time.
So much can go wrong. What was the thing? Maybe this is like one of those things pop in my head. I can't remember if I read it or if it was a joke, but like China was trying to develop something on the dark side of the moon. Am I totally making that up?
No, there's a bunch of, well, yeah, I think China's interested. So China has this giant radio telescope called FAST. We used to have one called the Arecibo, but it got destroyed during one of the recent storms. So it's just in pieces now, unfortunately. It's in Puerto Rico, and the NSF, National Science Foundation, supported it, but they didn't have enough money to basically refund it and rebuild it. So we lost it. It used to be the biggest in the world, and then China overtook us and built their own one. But radio telescopes are basically just giant dishes. They can be huge, like hundreds of, I think the FAST is like 500 meters or something across, absolutely gigantic. And the reason why you can build them so big is because they don't have to be very smooth. So unlike James Webb or an optical mirror, it's a piece of glass that's incredibly smooth. It's like has to be smoothed down to like nanometer scale. So it requires lots and lots of polishing, costs a bomb to make those things. And any slight piece of dust or anything is going to ruin it. But a radio telescope, it can basically be made out of concrete, and that's smooth enough to like, you can just pour concrete out. And it turns out some of the craters on the moon are almost the right shape, right? So they kind of look the right shape as a big dish. And so you probably, with a little bit of modification to those things, could use them as natural radio telescopes. And if you put it on the far side of the moon, it would be really advantageous because, one of the problems that alien hunters have, one of the ways we try to look for aliens is to listen for their radio signals. But we just are talking too much ourselves, right? There's all these like 4G, 5G towers going up everywhere. There's, people have got microwaves that they open and send out signals. There's radio channels all over the place, TV channels. So there's just way too much noise to like really clearly hear. So that's one of the big challenges of doing this work. But on the far side of the moon, there's nothing. Right? It's just dead quiet. So it would be like the perfect place to like really listen in and dial in to radio signals from alien civilizations, and also for astrophysics as well.
Can we pull that up, Joe? China, dark side of moon, just to see because it just gets so interesting, like you were saying, politically, when you're talking about like superpowers trying to do this, and now America's like, well, we want the dark side of the moon too.
There is no dark side of the moon, by the way. It's far side.
I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm so used to Pink Floyd.
Yeah, that's a common misconception.
So China has successfully completed the Chang'e 6 mission, which returned the first ever samples from the far side of the moon to Earth in June 2024. The mission involved a robotic lander and rover that collected about 2 kilograms of rocks and soil from the South Pole Aitken Basin and delivered them to Inner Mongolia, China. The samples are now being analyzed by scientists to learn more about the moon's history and the differences between its near and far sides.
Yeah, they grabbed some rocks off the far side and brought them over. Yeah, the reason the Apollo astronauts didn't go to the far side is because, for the same reason I just mentioned, you'd lose radio contact with the Earth.
Yeah.
So if something went wrong and they're out there, it's just those two guys by themselves, they're screwed. So all the astronaut missions we've ever launched have always been on the near side, so it's easy to be in constant communication with them.
And you said the moon's approximately 1% the mass of the Earth?
It's about 1% the mass, but about almost 25% the size.
Right, so you're talking about a big space right there.
Yeah, it's huge. The landmass is, I think, about the size of Africa, roughly. It's sort of the landmass you've got to work with. So, if you're a real estate developer, there's a lot of stuff to.
They got one of those in the White House right now.
Yeah.
We'll see if he gets any ideas. All right, Joe, let's get back to our list. We're like halfway through it. I like how this is going, just weaving in and out of this thing, coming back to 3i.
Good about side quests.
That's it. I love side quests. I'm from Jersey. It's what we do. All right, number 6. Talking about 3i Atlas. This is a part of the 10 ideas Avi Loeb had that makes this different. He says its gas plume contains only 4% water by mass, a primary constituent of familiar comets.
Yeah, so it's producing water, but maybe not as much water as you'd expect for a comet. But the fact it produces water at all is exactly what comets do. So, what Avi's been sort of suggesting in a big, more zoom out perspective from all of these points is that this is like maybe a Trojan horse, right? So maybe it's like dressed up to look like a comet, but it's actually an alien vehicle that's trying to trick us. And I think you can't really have it both ways, right? Either it's an alien spaceship that's just clearly detectable, or it's pretending to be a comet. But this isn't either of those things, right? Because if it's dressing up to look like a comet, it's not doing a very good job, because otherwise it wouldn't have any anomalies. Yeah. Everything about it would look like a comet. So the fact any of these things are anomalies means it doesn't really match up with the Trojan horse hypothesis at all, because surely aliens, if they're sending spaceships here, would be smart enough to not have 10 things which all give it away as being obviously alien. So what's the game there? So I just don't understand like even the premise of like picking out these individual things. But I think this particular point, it's just like, yeah, it's producing water, maybe not quite as much as a typical comet, but like that's exactly what comets do. They produce water.
That's the other problem though. If it were like invading or something like that, that's not, you would think, and everything's a hypothetical because it's really impossible to think the way another advanced, perhaps far more advanced civilization would think and how they even think. But you would think that it wouldn't be dressed up in any way. We wouldn't even know it's there. You would have to, I don't assume is a strong word, but when my mind starts to think about this stuff and you're talking about potentially a civilization that has figured out how to basically like bend time, move at the speed of light, do all these crazy things. If they figured that out, they've probably figured out like invisibility or other things like that, to the point that, you know, when people talk about like seeing UFOs or something like that in our atmosphere, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's like I've always thought that like they're simulating that. Like, let's show them one just to see how that idiot will react in the desert and tell everyone about it. Yeah. So if you were making a 1 kilometer long or whatever it is, like, you know, Trojan horse to come here, it wouldn't be the kind of thing that I would want, like, I don't know, trying to think like them, Avi Loeb to see and go on Joe Rogan and talk about like, hey, they're coming. It's right there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like, you know, the drag queen that can't put makeup on properly. Like, it's like, surely they could figure out a little bit. Like, why is this such a challenge? Like, that's what I don't get at all about this. So, I'm happy to entertain the idea there could be alien spaceships in our solar system. I think it's a really interesting idea. I think we should be looking for them.
Yes.
So whenever Abby said that, I'm like, yeah, I'm with you, brother. Like, we should have programs to look for that stuff. That's cool. But this object everything about it is like not that convincing. But you know, Abby keeps saying, I'm just saying it's a possibility. Like, you know, I'm just saying we should consider this as a possibility. But I mean, that's kind of a slippery slope, because then you could just say, well, what about this? I'm just saying this could be alien. You know, we should everything. You can say it about anything. Should do it.
Yeah, it is.
There you go. There you go. Alien. Right. It's supposed to be alien. So if you just say, well, I'm just saying it could be alien. Like, where do you stop? I mean, everything about this looks pretty comet-like. There's plenty of other stuff that you could chuck around the word alien on. So certainly by scientific standards, I get it's a cool and attractive idea, and it's jazzy, and people are drawn to it. But this is far off the scientific standards of evidence that we would want to have for a genuine alien detection.
You have to think about what the effect is of popularization and how you do it, right? Because, hey, aliens are very interesting. I'm fascinated by it. I look at the size of the known universe and I'm like, it seems impossible that there's not some sort of intelligent civilization out there, wherever that is. But then when you're getting to like the evidence of, oh, have they been here? Are they here? What are they? That's where it gets weird, because people, you know, I don't like to shoot everything down, but people make a lot of claims, and then you have the government getting involved, which, you know, let's call it what it is. They got a job to do that invites in disinformation on purpose, for sure. And people start to run with these narratives that because this, then that, and you're making fucking 40 million leaps when you do that. So when you start talking about things in space that seem to have, I mean, we're through like 6 or 7 of these, seem to have some rather viable scientific explanations to point to something different, I think you run the risk of actually setting the seriousness of that conversation back if you just start labeling something alien. It's a lot of fun, but, you know, I've enjoyed over the past year talking more with physicists and stuff. Not that Avi Loeb is not a physicist, to be clear, like he is. But I'm saying, like, I've enjoyed talking with, you know, you science guys, if you will, because you look at things based on what is the scientific evidence of what I can see, rather than like, oh, in 1964, we saw one in Socorro. It's more like, here's how it could happen, or here's what it is, or here's what we're looking at. And that, I think the conversation needs to be more there, and then not fall into kind of the trap of like just immediately running to, I see it, so I want to believe it.
Yeah, I don't want us to leave 3 Atlas because it's going to leave the solar system. It's on its way out, and we're going to get many more of these things, right? This is just the third, and we've just built a new telescope called Vera Rubin that's going to detect a ton of these things. So we're going to get like hundreds of these objects in the next like probably decade or so. So this is going to become like normal of having like tons of these objects, and I think people will just stop, getting so worked up after it's like number 72 of these things, right? You're just not going to be quite as engaged, and I hope we don't leave it thinking that, oh, the only interest scientists have in these objects is alien or not alien, because this object is a relic from another star system, right? We would love one day, if we could, to send astronauts to a nearby star, land on the ground, just like the Chinese did on the backside of the moon, pick up a rock and bring it home and be like, let's look at this rock. This rock is from a freaking another solar system. Yeah. Let's look at it. Let's dissect it. Let's see what's going on. Oh, look, their geology is different. Their chemistry is different. Everything's crazy there. These objects are that. If we could intercept them, we could get a ship. One of our own rockets could launch and catch up with these objects. We could land on it. Maybe not a human.
Land on it.
Yeah, we could land on these things. We could scoop up a rock, and just like we did for the moon, and we could bring it back to the Earth, and we could look at them.
Wait, was this the one that was going 60 kilometers a second, and we could land on that?
We could catch up with that. Yeah.
With what?
The best way. I mean, Avi was actually suggesting the Juno spacecraft could maybe do it. Juno doesn't have enough fuel, but if it had a bit more fuel, it wouldn't have been able to catch up with it. Juno's around Jupiter, but actually some of the Mars. If you were launching from Mars, it'd be actually pretty easy to catch up with it. If Elon Musk was a few years ahead and we had stuff on Mars already, we could have easily caught up with it. Yeah, this one's pretty fast, but Oumuamua and Borisov could have easily landed on as well if we'd had stuff in space ready to go. So the question is, like, you need to have a rocket just hanging out in the solar system, just waiting to turn on its afterburner, basically, and then like, okay, there it is, let's go get it. But we could do it, and then that would be, this is what's so cool about these objects, this would be material that we would have in the laboratory from another star system. There could be simple life buried inside this thing.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I'm not, I mean, let's forget like the advanced alien thing. There could be microbes buried inside the core of this little crust, right? So that would be mind-boggling. We'd have potentially, there could be DNA traces on this thing. So that's what gets me excited.
Wait, when you say DNA traces, meaning like a trace from an actual advanced civilization?
Well, not necessarily
kind of
events. Okay. Forget the event. Just something living.
Just something living.
Yeah. I mean, we know that happens like if you go to Antarctica, we talked about Antarctica earlier, that's the best place to find rocks from Mars. So Mars gets hit with meteors and it knocks rocks off Mars, and those rocks fly up into space, and some of them hit the Earth. And they hit all over the Earth, but in Antarctica they're really easy to see because it's all white. So if there's a black rock there, it's like super obvious. So people skidoo around and they find these black rocks, they bring them back, and we can reconstruct where they came from. And a good fraction of them do come from Mars, and we can study them, and that's how we've learned so much about what Mars is like without even visiting it, is just by aliens. They come to us, we don't have to go to them. And these objects are like that. We don't have, this kind of solves in so many ways the interstellar travel problem. We don't have to go to these other planets. It'd be great if we could, but this is like a shortcut. The universe is giving us a cheat code to see what these other planets are like without actually having to go there. So that to me is like by far like the coolest thing about these objects. Whether it's an alien spaceship or not is obviously a super sensational hypothesis. But even if that's not true, we shouldn't think, oh, who gives a shit about these objects? Then? Of course, like they're still like amazing.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like you put the term on it, like alien, and then when it's not, people are like, oh, it goes from 100 to 0. But this is an unbelievable, like you said, potential relic from somewhere else. But so you said they're simulating that it will leave the solar system. Do we have a length of time that'll take for that to happen?
So
estimated?
It's behind the sun right now. It's just poking back out, and then it will make its closest approach to the Earth in mid-December. Okay. But it's really far out from the Earth. Yeah. It's not going to hit us. No way. It's really, really far out. And then I think it passes next to Jupiter in sort of the spring. And then after that, just keeps on going
Keeps
out
going.
to the solar system. Yeah, so we can observe it for about the next year or so. We can keep observing it.
Which means as it does that, that'll also kind of take away the whole alien invasion argument because
yeah, it would just fly off and yeah. I mean, Avi's I think said maybe it will release a bunch of mini probes on Christmas Day, because that's close to the closest approach to the Earth, and then those mini probes. But I'm like, I'd give that very low probability. Yeah, I mean, it'd be wild if it was true, but I could say that about anything. I mean, I could say, maybe the nearest star will suddenly shoot a laser at us tomorrow on Christmas Day. Like, yeah, sure, I could say that, but I don't have any reason to believe that's going to happen.
I agree. It's also, though, when you're talking about something this size, like we know the story of the dinosaurs and it hit the Earth and everything, and it wasn't like a huge area. It was like a few kilometers or something like that, but it was enough to, on impact, destroy like climates and fuck up the whole thing. You know, if something like this, whether it was 3I Atlas or some other mass rock comet was coming towards the Earth these days, do we have the technology to be able to destroy something like that before it gets here?
Nukes really is probably our best bet. So yeah, you wouldn't actually probably blow up the asteroid or the comet. You would actually probably detonate your nuke off to the side of it. So if you if you blow up the actual thing like they do in Armageddon, you get a bunch of like crap that then is still on the same trajectory. What you really want to do is fly your nuke maybe a couple of kilometers off to the side, detonate it, and then that blast wave nudges it off into a different path.
Right.
So it remains largely intact, but it just gets deflected into a different position. So that would be your last ditch thing. So if you didn't have much time, that would be what you would do. If you had more time, if you had, maybe years to work with, maybe you could, some comets, we can trace them and we can see, oh, it's going to come by in 50 years and have a close approach to us. You can't do that for interstellar asteroids, but for comets in our own backyard, you can do that. So for those, it's even easier. All you need to do is, you could actually just paint one side of a rock dark or silver, and that'll do it. So if you have an asteroid and you paint one side of it white, you just paint bomb it on one side white.
That's it.
The sun's radiation nudges the white side more than the dark side, and so it would actually nudge it enough that you could deflect it from the Earth just with paint.
No kidding.
Yeah, just from the deflection of the sun's radiation.
We got that technology.
Yeah, we got that technology. Yeah, so that would be even easier. The biggest threat of these interstellar asteroids is that they are moving very fast, and we were kind of lucky with 3I Atlas in a sense. It is pretty big and it's easy to find, but it doesn't have to be that big. If it was 100 meters across, that's still a city killer. It would still, potentially enough to knock out New York City if it hit us. And that would be harder for us to see. And the fact it's moving so fast doesn't give you a lot of time. So you might only detect it like 2 weeks prior to impact. And then you're kind of in trouble. Like then it's hard to like get shit together in time to do something.
Well, that's where you're throwing all the money at the problem.
Yeah,
we're coming together and doing something.
Yeah. Maybe that's the way we unify.
yeah, right. Comet's coming. Here we go. All right, so we're at number 7 on this list now. It shows extreme, it being 3I Atlas, shows extreme negative polarization, unprecedented for all known comets, including 2I Borisov, with a likelihood below 1%.
Yeah, I think it's also weird. It's another oddity, but again, it's hard to compare to compared to 2 other objects. Sure.
Yeah, you're not comparing to hundreds or something.
Yeah, so I would just sort of hold my breath on that one and wait. Let's revisit that in 10 years, and I bet it'll be totally normal. Would be my guess amongst the hundreds we find.
All right, number 8. It arrived from a direction coincident with the radio quote wow signal unquote to within 9 degrees with a likelihood of 0.6%. I don't know what that means.
Okay, so there was a radio signal detected in the 1970s called the wow signal that a lot of people think is the most convincing evidence of an alien transmission we've ever received. It was detected by the Big Ear telescope in Ohio State. And it's still anomalous. There's no, people, it was just like literally when we had like ticker tape printouts, and you just see this like beep, this like one part of the sky suddenly get loud in the radio. I've actually written papers about that signal before, trying to figure out exactly what it is. It's a mystery. It remains a mystery. It's never repeated, and that's kind of curious. I've been advocating that we should observe it more intensely because a lot of astronomers said, hey, the fact it hasn't repeated means it's not aliens, but we haven't actually looked at that carefully. So I've been advocating that we need to have a more serious effort to survey that guy. And so this, if you look at whereabouts in the sky that comes from, 3 Atlas is coming 9 degrees off. But 9 degrees is a lot. I mean, it's actually not in space close at all. I mean, if you stretch that out,
it's crazy.
These kind of distances, you're talking like tens of thousands of light years separated. So this just isn't, it's too far to be like a meaningful. If it was like exactly where it was within like 0.1 degrees or something, then I'd be like, okay, Avi's got a point. But 9 degrees is massive.
Yeah, we're thinking about it in near term effects. Like if I do this right here,
right?
But if
now
I do
stretch
45
that out by huge cosmic distances, and you're talking about things which are so far apart from each other,
not even close.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Number 9, near perihelion, it brightened faster than any known comet and was bluer than the sun. Maybe we can pull up an image of this again, Deef, so people can observe that.
Yeah. I think to this one, it brightened really fast compared to any known comet. True. But it is moving faster than any known comet.
Right. I was going to say, it doesn't have to do with the speed.
Yeah. It's maybe not a surprise it's doing that.
Okay. And that's that wired image right there. Is that?
That looks like an artist's impression. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think this is necessarily a single image. It's just a collection of observations put together. They've pieced that. Yeah.
Okay. Let's go to number 10. Wherever that is. All right. So 3I Atlas exhibits non-gravitational acceleration, which requires massive evaporation of at least 13% of its mass, but preliminary post-perihelion images do not show the evidence for it so far.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is exactly what comets do. They lose a ton of mass when they get close to the sun. It's a ball of ice and snow. As it gets close to a freaking star, is going to boil off a lot of that snow and ice. So the fact it's losing a load of mass is exactly what a comet should do. So yeah, I don't really get this one as an anomaly. That's just, it's exactly what it should do. I think all of these anomalies, by the way, are like changing. So when the first, Avi was first writing about this, I think there was only like 4 or 5 anomalies, and it's kind of like the list has grown. And that's a little bit precarious as well, because you're kind of like, oh, it did something else, I'm going to add this on, I'm going to add this on. But all the stuff that it does that's normal, you don't add on. So, it's again, this kind of like p-hacking mentality of just like selectively choosing things to kind of engineer the narrative to be as strange as you want it to be. So I think that's a little bit precarious. And some of the things, I mean, when it was, some of the initial anomalies that Avi was writing about was the fact it doesn't have a coma. So when it was first detected, we couldn't see any coma or tail off it at all. But that was when it was really far out and really far out in the solar system. And then it started to develop a coma. And so as soon as it had a coma and a tail, that seemed, a lot of astronomers were like, oh, Avi's going to give up on this now because it's doing the thing that a comet does, which is have a coma and a tail. He's going to forget about that. But then instead he said, and he wrote this on his blog, that actually I think this is a spaceship that's producing a shield. It's like flying off particles to try and protect it from space dust. And it just happens to like look very similar to what a comet would do. So again, it's kind of like you're changing the story as you go along. Like just if it's a ship and it's not producing anything, then just stick with that hypothesis. And that hypothesis is now out. Like once you've got observations which undermine your hypothesis, it's rejected. But you can't keep editing the hypothesis on the fly to fit the data 100%. In real time, because then that's not science. That's just story weaving, right? So this is the big, aliens is like such a flexible hypothesis. Aliens can explain anything. So literally anything that happens in the universe, in this room, the reason why your mom doesn't call you tomorrow, or the reason why you dropped your coffee down the stairs. You could always just say, oh, aliens did that. And I can't prove you wrong, but it doesn't make it a good hypothesis just because it's too malleable and too flexible. I think you really need to see something pretty extraordinary. So like I said, if it stopped, if it shined a laser beam at us or something, sent a radio emission at us, like, hey, we're here, like here's a television signal beamed your way or something, I'd be down with it. But everything on this list is like very much what comets do. Maybe it's a slightly unusual thing, like extreme example of what a comet would do, but it's definitely very comet-like, everything it's doing.
We know approximately how old it is. We know where it's coming from. We know the path it's been taking, and therefore the projected path it's going to take past that. and it hasn't, like you gave an example early on in the conversation, like, well, if it suddenly went up or down or all around, okay, you might think like something's maneuvering that, but it hasn't. There's no evidence to show it's done any of that.
Right. And I can't disprove a negative. No one can. So I can't prove to anyone here who's listening who really believes this is an alien spaceship. I can't prove to you it's not an alien spaceship because you can't. You can never prove that something is not alien. I can't prove that anything in this room is not made by an alien, right? It's impossible to do that. So if you want to like have that as a personal hypothesis, you can. But unless it does something that nature just absolutely cannot do and it breaks our understanding of nature, then that's the only time I think that the scientific community are going to get behind it. And look, I think what we all want, do you really want to have like a personal hypothesis that is just you? I think this thing is alien, or I think we all want to convince our peers, we want to convince our friends that what we saw was real, you know, that this was a real alien ship that you encountered. And the only way to get buy-in is to provide really compelling evidence that even this, you want the evidence to be so good that even the skeptics are like, I can't fault you, man. Like, you're right. Like, there's no, you know, it's like Michael Jordan was so good that even the people that hated Michael Jordan were like, damn, he's the best. Like, there's no way around that. And that's what we want in science. We want it to be like so clear and crisp that even the skeptics have to shut up and that's how all of science works. It's not particular to aliens. If you're going to claim you've got like a new theory of gravity or you think you've discovered a new exoplanet, it has to be that everyone who comes at that data is going to arrive at the same conclusion, no matter what different assumptions they're making. So this is, and I think aliens has got an even bigger responsibility to sort of, you know, take this more carefully 100%. Because we're so invested in it.
100%. And it's like, you can't get too excited about it. And what it seems like from what you're telling me today is that, you know, for this particular argument, a lot of the scientific community seems to be on the other side of Avi Loeb and saying like, this is probably what we're looking at. It's probably not an alien spaceship because the evidence, like a lot of this is too chancery. I'm making up a word there, but it's not like intense, like down to 0.40 million zeros one evidence or anything like that.
Everything's is either completely exactly what a comet should do, like have a tail on a comet and produce those gases, or it's comet-like, but like an extreme comet. But if it was a Trojan horse, like why wouldn't they do a better job if that's true? So I think the alien hypothesis is in deep trouble with this object, but I do admire Avi for pushing, because this is, it's easy to say this and get ridiculed, right? And I think Avi has been ridiculed for that. And I don't ridicule Avi for pushing the alien hypothesis, because I do think we need, it's easy to get stuck in groupthink and get too conservative and just like ridicule anyone who tries to do something different and push the envelope. So even though I disagree with Avi that I don't think this is alien, I'm not going to like throw shit on him and say he's an idiot for saying this. I think it's he's you know, pursuing his scientific ideas, and I disagree with it in a respectful way. But I'm not going to like personally attack him as saying like he's a doofus for like coming up with this idea.
That's how it should be. This is what science is supposed to be. We've lost sight of this in the modern era, and it's not just science. It's fucking every part of culture. It's like you throw mud on each other to get more clicks, and therefore everyone who disagrees with you is an idiot, and that doesn't get anyone anywhere. No. I've always said, you know, the greatest lie we ever perpetuated on humanity was that science and religion were competing. They're both seeking the answer to the same thing. And then that's just been downstream to everything else, be it politics, culture, whatever it may be. We are always thinking that, you know, the other idea can't exist for us to exist or whatever. And that's not how it is. You're constantly trying to find things that one day are going to disprove every single thing that like a brilliant guy like Albert Einstein came up with. That's the whole point, you know?
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of similar to business. Like if you're an entrepreneur and you start a company, your first company might fail and the second one might fail, but maybe, you know, if you keep getting chances, you'll eventually figure out how it works and break through. And America's great because you know, it has really good like loan forgiveness and like it lets people keep trying. Whereas if you start a business in France and it fails, like you're not allowed to get a loan for like 50 years of your life, right? They don't want you to ever try again. Yeah. And I do kind of worry. Maybe Avi's wrong about this, but hey, maybe he'll be right about another signal. Maybe not a comet, but something else in the future. And I'm worried that a lot of scientists will just not pay attention to him because they're like, "You've burnt your reputation, dude, with this one. I'm not going to listen to anything you say ever again." And that's also very closed-minded. Like we have to. It's like Icarus, right? You have to fly close to the sun to really advance.
Yes.
And maybe in this case, in my opinion, I think the wings are melting off and he's falling, but we should keep giving the dude a chance to like
with evidence
to push the envelope.
Yeah, if you bring evidence, it should be evaluated.
Yeah.
And if the evidence is good, then you take a farther look. If
Yeah.
it's things that maybe can be refuted in good scientific mathematical ways, then you go, okay, this isn't the one, pal.
Yeah.
You know, it shouldn't be that hard. But when did you grow up wanting to be an astrophysicist? Were you just fascinated with space as a little kid?
I was always fascinated with space. Yeah, I remember loving planets and the universe when I was a kid. I loved sci-fi. I loved Star Trek. Loved Star Trek growing up. Next Generation was my bag. Yeah, and Star Wars, all that kind of stuff. And then, yeah, I thought I was going to be a physicist. When I was about sort of 12, 13, I was getting really interested in physics, and I had a great high school teacher, Mr. Fox, and he gave me a load of physics books on the side. He was like, you should check this out. And I was reading it. I was like, oh, wow, this is crazy. Like there's neutrinos passing through my brain right now. There's like all this particles everywhere. It kind of was like an enlightenment, like when you realize the world's so much more complicated than you think. So I studied physics at college. And then when I was at college, I started to come back to space because I got the impression, if I'm right, or maybe it's pretty wrong, I think it is partially wrong, but that to make progress in physics was getting really hard. That you needed like billions and billions of dollars to, you know, have these huge teams of thousands of people, and you were just going to be one very small cog in that machine. Whereas in astronomy, there's 100 billion stars in our Milky Way galaxy, and there's only 8 billion people on Earth. So each of us can have 100 stars to ourselves, more than that, right? Just
unreal.
You could have just 100 stars that you yourself could study your whole life, and everyone else could have their own 100 stars. We could all move there and have our, this is my 100-star system that I live on. And each of those would have about 10 planets, and you know, you could have 1,000 planets to yourself, right? So
That's crazy.
That's just how ridiculous the scale of the universe is. And I realized we are never gonna like get bored of this. We're never going to run out of stuff to discover because we only know of a percent of a percent of a percent of what's out there. And in physics, it kind of, I'm sure there's a vast amount we don't know about as well, but it felt to me like all the rapid progress and discovery was happening in the universe. Yeah.
So you start to take that journey through school itself, and then you get into that, and eventually, like, and you've mentioned this term several times today, I think you started to explain it once, but you developed a specialty in identifying exoplanets and observing them. Yeah. So for people out there that just want to understand what that is, as a recap, what is an exoplanet?
Yeah, it's just a planet that orbits another star. That's what it means. So exo means outside. So extrasolar is the full name, but we just shorten it to exoplanets. So we know of about 5,000 to 6,000 exoplanets, I believe, at the time of writing, which is obviously a lot. We've only discovered those in the last 20 years.
5,000 to 6,000.
I think about 6,000 confirmed planets now, yeah. And the discovery started about 20, 25 years ago, and there's been a rapid explosion in discovery over that time. And yeah, I was in college when the first ones were being discovered. And to me, as a young person, this was like, it's like the gold rush in San Francisco, right? Everyone, as a young person, you're like, this is where all the shit's happening. I want to get over there and pick up some gold for myself. And I've discovered myself like probably a dozen planets or something. I don't even count them, but yeah, I've found a fair few planets myself in my career, which is kind of wild to think about.
How do you find one?
So there's a few different ways. The way I normally use is called the transit method, which is to look for eclipses, basically. So these planets are so far away, thousands of light years away sometimes, that you can't possibly take a photo of them. They're just, at that distance, the star and the planet are just a blob of light. Right. You can't possibly see them. But if the orbital inclination is correct, it will sometimes eclipse in front of the star. The same reason why we had like when the moon eclipsed the sun, because that solar eclipse. Maybe you saw those 2 great American eclipses we had fairly recently in the US, which was awesome to see.
Stare right at it.
Yeah. Well, you want the glasses, but yeah, be careful with that. So yeah, I really enjoyed watching those. And it's the same thing. You can also see transits of Venus. Venus sometimes goes in front of the sun. And you can catch that. You probably need a telescope or a good pair of binoculars to catch those, but those are fun to watch. And so in the same sense, some of these exoplanets will serendipitously pass in front of their star. And as they do, the star gets dimmer, right? Because some of the light's being blocked out. So that's what we look for. We just look for these like stars that are winking at us, basically, just getting like a little bit dimmer and then they get back to normal. And we notice that every 10 days that happens. And so if it happens every 10 days, that means the planet is on an orbital period of 10 days around its star. So that's its year.
And you can identify that that's a planet versus, you know, some sort of like loose piece in space or something like that, strictly because of the size.
Yeah, well, you know it's an orbiting object if it repeats. The size of it basically tells you. Yeah, so a lot of the objects we detect are typically like, you know, between the size of Neptune and Jupiter. So that's not debris. Obviously, if it's the size of Neptune, that's a pretty big object. Yeah, if you make the planet twice as big, it blocks out 4 times the amount of light. So that means big planets are really easy to find, but small planets are really hard to find. And the smallest planets we can currently detect are about the size of the moon at best, but typically the Earth. So we can find Earth-sized planets. There's a really beautiful star system called TRAPPIST-1 that
TRAPPIST-1?
Yeah, that I recommend everyone Google at some point. It's the most famous exoplanet system at this point. It has 7 planets. They're all Earth-size. 3 of them in the habitable zone of the star.
Meaning like you could actually land on them and you're not frying to death or freezing to death.
The habitable zone here just means that the temperature is similar to the Earth, basically.
Wow.
Yeah, so they had the right distance for life.
This is it, TRAPPIST-1?
Yeah, and this is most astronomers' favorite exoplanet system. The 7, it's a really dim star. The star is about 8 times less massive than the sun. And so it's a really diminutive star. It's very red because it's so cool. And so the planets are actually packed in really close in. I think all 7 planets are closer in than Mercury is around the sun, all 7 of them. So, you know, like they're kind of the same sort of distance that the moon is from us. So if there's an alien civilization here, they could like hop from planet to planet, like no problem, be super easy. In fact, even like if there was life on one of these planets, it would almost certainly just spread out between the planets by rocks just being knocked off from between them.
How far away is this approximately?
About 30 light years, which is actually pretty close. That's actually really close by astronomy standards, yeah. So this is a very nearby favorite object. James Webb is spending a lot of time looking at this thing. And planet E, right in the middle there, that is, we think, the most Earth-like planet of the bunch in terms of it's like the perfect distance, really. Yeah. And so there's a huge amount of attention to try and figure out, does that have an atmosphere? And does that atmosphere maybe have oxygen? Does it have, you know, the molecules that we have in our planet?
But we can't tell that yet with the tools we have. Like it's still too far.
So far, what we can tell is that planet B and C do not have atmospheres. That's something that James Webb has told us. So in the last year, we've discovered that. The inner 2 planets are so close to the star that the atmosphere must have been removed somehow. It's probably like been stripped off from the stellar activity.
Wow, so almost like burned away.
Yeah. Okay. So the question is, what's D like? D, there's some ambiguity. We need a bit more data, and E, we're collecting that data right now.
So have we even been able to tell, like, oh, there's water there, or still no?
No, we don't even know if there's an atmosphere there at this point. Yeah.
Now, how do you collect that data then? Like you say, we're collecting that data now. Like,
yeah.
What are they doing?
It's a lot of transit work, actually. So that same technique of how we detect the planet. Imagine you do that same observation. You see the dip in light of starlight. Now, you repeat that observation. Let's say we were imagining the Earth transit the sun, and we do it in the blue wavelengths of light, and we do it in the red wavelengths of light. Now, what color is the sky?
Well, to me, it's blue.
Yeah, it's blue sky. And that's because our atmosphere...
I was waiting for a trick question there. I'm like, to me, that shit's blue.
Pop great, you go A+. We have a blue sky because the molecules in our atmosphere scatter blue light. So if we didn't have an atmosphere, obviously that wouldn't happen. The sky would just look black. You wouldn't have any of that. So if an alien was watching the Earth transit the sun and they did it in the blue wavelength, you can kind of think of the atmosphere as being like opaque, like it would block out all the blue light. So all the blue light wouldn't be able to travel through the atmosphere. It gets stopped by our atmosphere and bounces around. That's what makes it look blue. So therefore, the planet is effectively a bit bigger because it's the rock plus the atmosphere. So that's its size. Whereas in the red wavelengths of light, when you see a sunset, the red light just goes straight through, no problem. So red just travels straight through the atmosphere and it will come out the other end, no problem. So the red light, the atmosphere is not there, essentially. It's just the rock by itself. So you would see a bigger planet in blue wavelengths and a smaller planet in red wavelengths. And you can break that down into more fine colors. You could look at individual wavelengths of light. And carbon dioxide, for example, absorbs at exactly 4.6 microns, I think it is. And it makes the planet look huge. So you're looking at all these wavelengths like 4.0, 4.1, 4.2. It's just the same size, same size, same size. And then you go to 4.6 and suddenly the planet looks bigger. Right. And you're like, holy shit, like it's got carbon dioxide in the atmosphere because that's the thing that absorbs at that wavelength. So that's how we can tell. Like we see the planets get bigger basically at the wavelengths of light where certain molecules absorb.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's pretty clever.
It all comes back.
We can smell. Somehow we can smell the atmosphere.
We can smell it.
That's what we're doing, right?
Wait, what? Wait, now you're losing me.
Not literally, but
okay.
But we are kind of figuring out the chemical composition. It's like a sniffoscope. You're seeing the light break down. You can figure out the chemicals. It is essentially, it's using the sense of smell. Maybe it's not a good analogy, but that's the way I think about it.
Yeah, you got to watch it because I'll start believing you when you start telling me, like, we can smell that shit.
I think in Futurama, like he actually builds a sniffoscope in the show where he sticks two things from his nostrils and he's got a giant scope.
Well, they say art imitates life. Yeah. Life imitates art, so you never know. Yeah. But so when you have this whole cool worlds program over at Columbia that you've been doing, you also have an amazing YouTube channel where you bring it to the public as well. But like, what's your process? Like, do you walk in there and say, all right, let's find an exoplanet today? Or is it way more targeted than that? And like trying to look at the exoplanets you already know that then allows you to find other exoplanets some way through that?
Yeah, I mean, different groups have different goals and aspirations, and it really comes down to the individual leaders of these teams. For me, I'm not that interested in just discovering more planets. I'm kind of done with that a little bit. Like, okay, we've got 6,000. We've got 6,000 of the damn things. Like, we don't need any more. Like, we've seen a bunch of planets at this point. So for me, I always want to do something new. Like, it has to be something that's never been done before, that's pushing the envelope. So for me, one of my big challenges has been to look for exomoons. So moons around those planets. We have no confirmed exomoons whatsoever.
Zero.
Wow. I found 2 candidates using the Hubble Space Telescope and the James Webb and the Kepler Space Telescope. So we have 2 candidate objects, and we are trying to get more data from James Webb to try and find even more and confirm the ones that we have. So
what makes them candidates?
Because we just have one dip. So, I talked about earlier, like with these dips of light, you want to see like repeated dips.
Right.
And then you're like, okay, that's real. But if it's a one-off, like you never know. Like it could just be something weird with it. Maybe there's someone shook the telescope that day or something went wrong, something electronic defect or something. So you just want to make sure that it's real. And exomoons would be pretty cool to find. They could be habitable in their own right, like Pandora and avatars like that, right? You got all these blue aliens running around on the moon. So they could be like a huge fraction of alien. Maybe like most aliens live on moons and they look at the Earth and like, there's no point looking there because that's not a moon, right? They just think that planets are like boring places to look at. Our own moon actually is probably super influential for the Earth being habitable. Some people say if you took away the moon, we wouldn't be here. It stabilizes our axis. So if you took away the moon, the axial tilt's about 23 degrees, but it would wander, it would drift. And so there'd be some times where the North Pole was just pointing straight at the sun. And so the South Pole just totally, the Southern Hemisphere just totally freeze out for several months of the year.
Wouldn't we also have like massive tide problems and stuff too?
Without the moon? Well, you'd have less tides without the moon. You'd have fewer tides without the moon. So, but actually tides are thought to be a good thing for life as well. One of the theories of the origins of life is like rock pools, basically. So if you go to a beach and you see a rock pool, the chemicals get kind of concentrated in these little pools. And when the moon first formed, it was way closer. It would have been like about 30, 40 times larger in the sky. It was really close. And it would have made tides that were so big, the entire continent would have been covered in
That's what I'm saying. And like Bruce Almighty, when it's like...
Yeah, it would have been like
this,
that.
And then it's like flooding the whole fucking
Earth. The whole
Earth.
planet would have been flooded, basically. And that would happen every day. And
that's
so
not good.
it's maybe not good for building a house, but actually kind of good for getting things going for life, because you can have loads of these rock pools covering an entire continent.
Let's not try that.
I don't want to try that, but fortunately we don't have the ability to try that anyway.
Okay.
So that could be useful. And then the third reason is we want to one day actually take a photo of another Earth. I talked about this telescope before, the Habitable Worlds Observatory, that we'd love to build if we could with NASA. We're doing some of the early calculations now about what that would look like. Maybe you can Google pale blue dot for me.
Pale blue dot.
Yeah, this is a famous photo of the Earth, actually.
So you're talking directly with NASA about that?
Well, not me. I mean, I'm one of many astronomers. Yeah, it's not like, hey, NASA.
Yeah, you don't have
David Kipping here. Start building it. Oh, okay, yes, sir. We'll get on it right away.
Well, keep doing podcasts. We'll get you there.
So, if you look at like maybe the BBC image, it's kind of a cool one. So that is a photo of the Earth. Taken by, I think it was one of the Voyager spacecrafts that took this image, and Carl Sagan asked the vehicle to turn around and take a photo of the Earth. So this is taken from, I think, where Neptune is, from the distance of Neptune.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
far.
so it's really far out. And obviously the Earth is just like basically a single pixel of just this smudgy blue thing. And that's kind of the image we're probably going to get one day of an exoplanet as we build these telescopes. So we'll hopefully get an image like that of another an Earth-like planet far from its star. But where's the moon in that image?
You can't see it.
It's just smushed in there.
It's too small.
Yeah. And so one of the reasons we want to look for these moons is because we need to know if that moon's in there or not, because it makes a big difference to all this chemistry stuff I was talking about. So one of the possible signatures of life is oxygen that we talked about. But oxygen can also be made without life. Water makes oxygen actually quite easily because it is made of oxygen.
Yeah.
So if you just split hydrogen up and oxygen, you get oxygen in the atmosphere. So that can happen. It's called photolysis. So people say oxygen's not enough. You need both oxygen plus something else, and methane is usually the other molecule that people talk about. Now Titan is a moon of Saturn that has tons of methane. So if the Earth didn't have life, it might still form oxygen through this photolysis, a small amount. And if it had a Titan-like moon, it would have methane. And so you'd look at this blob and you'd see, oh, it's got oxygen, it's got methane, boom, we're done. It's got life, but actually it could be a lifeless world. So if you didn't know the moon was there, the moon could trick you into thinking you detected life when there isn't really life. So if we ever want to understand these images properly, we have to know if there's a moon there or not. So that's one of the other big reasons I think this is really cool, to try and figure out the moon population in the universe.
What's like the effect though when planets have multiple moons? Like we have one here, but like if you ran, I'm making something up, if you ran
Jupiter
into an
has tons,
exoplanet, but if you even ran into an exoplanet somewhere else, so not just within our solar system, like, and you see one with 4, what effect is that having on life? Or is there even a way could it be multiple possibilities?
Depends what the moons are doing, what their orbits look like. Yeah, so the moons of Jupiter, for instance, there's 4 big moons of Jupiter. So they're the Galilean moons. And they do really wild stuff between them. So Io's like super volcanic. And the reason is because it's like a rock stuck between a hard place. It's got these 3 moons on the outside, which are kind of tugging it out. And it's got Jupiter on the inside, which is tugging it in. So it's just being like pulled each way. And it kind of distorts and stretches the rock. And that actually causes all this volcanism on the surface of the moon. It also, these moons don't stay in the same place. They move. So our own moon is moving away from us about 1 inch per year. So, in principle, you could lose moons eventually over
1
billions
inch
of
per
years.
year.
Yes, I said the moon used to be a lot closer, and that's the speed it's moving out. But
I feel like we could make that up somehow with tech, like yank it back a little bit, moves 10 inches,
It's a lot of mass. It's big.
It's a lot of mass.
Yeah, you need a lot of energy to do that. It doesn't really affect us in any way. Actually, the cool thing is it's not cool, but we'd eventually lose solar eclipses. As the moon is like basically the perfect size to block out the sun. As it gets further away, it will get smaller in a projected sense. And so eventually you won't get solar eclipses anymore. It's kind of weird. This is like one of those simulation things. Like it's kind of weird that we even have a moon which happens to be exactly the same size as the sun in terms
almost
of
like they lined it up perfect. Right?
I know. And not only the same size, but that they're in the same plane to allow for those eclipses. This is why the Earth would be like the alien tourist hotspot, in my opinion, right? There's probably very few planets in the universe where you could see a perfect solar eclipse. We are probably And they would surely know that. They would surely be able to look at the, if an alien had this image of us, they'd be able to figure out the moon, be able to figure out the planet, get the geometry, be like, oh, holy shit, these guys get solar eclipses. This is why the Fermi paradox is actually, to me, such a strange thing. Like I'm sure an alien would look at the Earth and be like, damn, there's stuff going on there.
So you're not one of these people. It's like, they'd be like, that's not interesting at all. You think the opposite.
Oh, no. I mean, from everything we know, about exoplanets is that the solar system is not normal. Even having a Jupiter-sized planet is weird. Only 10% of stars have a Jupiter-sized planet. We've got 2 of the damn things.
But we also only know, and I say only, just looking at it in the full context of like the universe, we only know of 5,000 to 6,000 exoplanets and X number, whatever it is, of solar systems. And yet, the universe, the known universe, you said, that exists within what we can tell by light, could just be one little marble ball from that Men in Black, last scene where it's a marble inside of a marble inside of a marble and someone playing with it. And hypothetically, that could mean that there are quadrillion, trillion, billion, gazillion, planets like this that exist out on the plains. So maybe if you're an advanced civilization that, I don't know, has figured out some way to be able to see into other parts of the universe at any given time, you might have a gazillion types of Earth to choose from, even if based on what we know right now, which seems to be a lot, is like, wow, we can't find anything like Earth.
Yeah, I mean, if you imagine aliens being basically able to do magic, they're so sophisticated, they can do stuff we can't possibly contemplate, then all bets are off, right? It's really hard for us to speculate about either their interests, their activities, the way they think about the universe, how special or rare anything is. For those guys, like, all bets are off. So I don't even worry about that too much. Frankly, this is Arthur C. Clarke. Arthur C. Clarke said any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. There's another sci-fi writer called Carl Schroeder, who is a modern guy, and he took a twist on that, and he said any sufficiently advanced aliens is indistinguishable from nature.
From nature?
Yeah. So let's take the galaxy. We see the galaxy, and we just assume it's natural. We think we can kind of come up with a story of how it was made and make sense to us, but it is possible that that's just an alien made that, right? We don't know that. We can't prove the Milky Way is not an industrial project of another civilization. That's just so far beyond us. We think it's natural because we can't even contemplate the possibility of someone that advanced being able to do those things. Maybe all stars are engineered products. Right? We think a star is a natural thing. Who knows if that's true or not? So all of our astrophysics is kind of based on the assumption of, all of science is based on the assumption of naturalism. That's kind of a fundamental tenet to science, is that the universe is natural, and it's our job to try to come up with a natural explanation for why everything happens, a mechanistic. And that's worked really well for us. Through that naturalistic view of the universe, we can predict how a semiconductor will act if you give it a charge, and that allows you to have an iPhone, and that allows you to build computers and have airplanes, and all of society and technology is basically built on this assumption. But when you try and extrapolate that to the whole universe, like it is hard. Like we have to kind of operate in that assumption, but it's unproven, it's unfounded. So I am open-minded to that possibility, but it doesn't really have much utility to a scientist, because what am I supposed to do with that? Like, it's fun to philosophically play with, but it's probably not a useful starting point for trying to like make predictions, because who knows what these creatures would do.
Yeah, and I've heard some of the scientists obviously argue on with the Fermi paradox, where it's like it'd be uninteresting. It's just you can't even conceive how an advanced civilization, regardless of how advanced they are, would even think, or what their utopian worldview, whatever that is, could be. So it is weird to think about, but there are, to your point, so many perfect things that line up in our little area of the universe that you have to wonder, like, what did create that? If it is more along, what was the name of that scientist again who came up with the nature indistinguishable from?
Oh, that's Carl Schroeder.
So Schroeder,
a writer, yeah.
So if it's along Schroeder's lines, and potentially nature was created by some form of man, so some form of alien somewhere else, okay. Or you can get to the question of, like, there has to be a creator on top of something like this, because everything's so perfect and so aligned, not just in our area, but everything we're looking to solve in the universe is based on math and light and, the senses coming together in weird ways.
Yeah.
What's your opinion on that?
Have
you thought about where it all comes from?
Yeah, this is kind of into an idea of like fine tuning as well a little bit. So it's not just the conditions of our planet, but even the conditions of the universe seem well constructed for life. If you make a good example is the mass of the proton, the neutron. The mass of the neutron is a little bit heavier than the proton, but only by about 0.14%, I think it is. And that's suspiciously close. If it was 0.3% or higher, basically you wouldn't be able to have atoms. The atomic nuclei would be unstable. They would immediately decay. And if it was the other way around and protons were heavier, then protons would decay into neutrons. And then you wouldn't be able to have any atoms that way either. So there's like this very narrow corridor of basically between 0 and 0.2% that those have to be balanced within, and it's perfect.
It's perfect.
And it's not just those two numbers. There's like a bunch of numbers like that in the universe that seem really finely tuned. So there's a few different ways of answering that, but the two very common ways are you say you have to invoke a creator or something, or say it's a simulated universe or a god or something created this, and that's why it seems that way. The other hypothesis is that you could say there's a multiverse. There's countless numbers of universes out there, and most of them have arbitrary values of these numbers, and we don't live in any of those because, of course we don't. There's no one in there. There's no atoms in those universes. So
what do you mean arbitrary values of those numbers?
So let's make the mass of the electron, 3 times heavier than it is in our universe.
And it works in another multiverse.
Well, you could just choose those numbers to be whatever you want, right? Especially, if you buy into the string theory comes up with 10 to the 80 different universes that are possible, and each of them have different rules of physics, different constants, and all of them are real solutions to string theory. So it's possible there are many different universes out there with different values, and those would never have creatures in them. They would never have life in them. And so maybe some of them do. Maybe there's some weird combinations of things that we hadn't anticipated where you actually do get aliens, but we shouldn't be surprised to live in a universe where things seem finely tuned, because it would be impossible for us to live in a universe where that was not so.
Yes.
So it's kind of like a chicken and egg type situation, a catch-22. Like you start to sort of eat your own tail in this logic. But it is fascinating, and lots of cosmologists are deeply interested in this problem. Yeah. And it seems, and there are some credible reasons to believe in a multiverse as well that could maybe give us some credence.
What are some of, besides what you were just going through right there? What are some of the most credible reasons you're seeing right now? Because I've had Brian Keating sitting here, who was a couple times, who was working on a project for 15 years to basically prove that the universe, if they were able to prove it, was inflationary, which would, the way he explained it scientifically, you would know better than me, basically would say that means, yes, we have a multiverse. Turned out he was looking at universal dust and not what they were looking for, so they couldn't prove that. Yeah. But what kinds of things could point to us having the different transistor radios?
Yeah, I would say the same thing more or less as what Brian would have told you, that the theory of inflation is the theory, it's kind of almost the theory of the Big Bang. It's like what happened in the earliest stages of the universe. How did we get this extreme rapid expansion phase of the universe? And we believe if you don't have inflation, you can't really explain so many things about the light that we see from all directions in the universe. This is called the CMB, the cosmic microwave background. So we see light from all directions. It's the leftover radiation from this earliest period, the Big Bang itself, essentially. And what you notice is that it's the same temperature in all directions. And there are some correlations embedded within those that are very weak but are detectable. And they imply that somehow one region of space on this side of the universe and one region of space over that side of the universe were in contact with each other. And when you look at the rate of expansion of the universe, that shouldn't happen. They should never have been in contact with each other. There's no way for light to have possibly have had time, given the age of the universe, to have gone from here to here, even if you reverse the clock. So the solution to that is inflation. Inflation says, look, I have a way of explaining that. There was a period where the universe was expanding faster than the speed of light, super fast, and then everything can kind of come back into causal contact. You could also try other things like changing the speed of light. You could say maybe the speed of light was faster in the early universe than it is today. And that would be a way of making these things have contact with each other as well. But that comes with lots of other problems, and generally it's not as favored as inflation. So inflation has a few different predictions. And one of them that Brian was looking for was these gravitational waves that would be left over from the Big Bang as well. So we definitely have quite a bit of evidence for inflation at this point. And there's many different theories of inflation. There's not just one, but in almost all of them, you end up with a multiverse. So a multiverse is just very difficult to avoid in inflationary theories. And it asks an interesting philosophical question as to whether this is science or not, to be honest, because by definition, a universe outside of our universe can't ever be testable, right? And science is all about evidence, testing.
I want to hear
in our universe,
right?
Yeah, there's no one in our universe could ever detect the presence of another universe, but because the universe is supposed to be everything, right? So you can't possibly leave your universe, as far as we know. And so the question is then: is the concept of another universe even truly science anymore? Like, what are we talking about?
Interesting. I've never heard that argument. Okay, I mean, it makes sense what you're saying.
Yeah,
but I don't know. I'm getting a little Philip K. Dick now if we start talking about this. But I'm sure you're familiar with at least some of his work and stuff. He's a legend from the sci-fi space. But I'm thinking of like the one example, The Man in the High Castle, which they later made a TV show as well. The way that they were bending time, their time traveling, was they were traveling between dimensions, which would mean someone from this dimension, if you were ever able to figure out how to do this, was going into another dimension to observe and test things in that dimension. In that case, if you are coming from the dimension we're in to go in, and were able to figure out a way to go in, tap into the other dimension to study something, does that then constitute science? Because we're coming from the place where science exists.
Yeah, if you could traverse or interact with them, then I think you could do experiments and test it and prove it. And it's important to be clear, there's many different definitions of multiverse. So we already talked about one earlier on the show with this Hugh Everett stuff of like, that's like a multiverse, right? The many worlds hypothesis says in a quantum sense, there's another universe right here in this room that's almost like slightly offset from us. It's decohered from us. And therefore we can't interact with it, but it is literally in the same space and time as us. This multiverse is different. This is like saying if you travel in a spaceship just forever and ever and ever, you just keep going, you'll eventually reach regions of space where the laws of physics could be different. And that's still, in a sense, part of the infinite universe, but in another sense, it's a completely different pocket universe all to its own. And then inflation says there's another type of multiverse beyond that. You can't even leave this bubble. If you could just travel forever. There's infinite space inside each bubble, but there's also an infinite number of bubbles. So this is where it gets really trippy. There's an infinite number of universes, each with infinite amount of space within each of them. So that really is like the marbles from Men in Black. And those, that some of them will be identical to us, which is really wild because there's infinities involved. There'll be an infinite number of all of us having this conversation. And
it's like a small butterfly effect across each transistor motion.
Yeah, so ones will be maybe wearing a red t-shirt in some of them. That's the only difference. But in other ones, it will just be almost identical. And so this is where science starts to get a bit philosophical, a bit metaphysical, and there are legitimate questions. Some cosmologists and physicists strongly feel like this is just pseudoscience. This is not legitimate, but inflation is definitely not pseudoscience. It explains a ton of observations. It's real, it's credible. It makes predictions that were confirmed, real predictions that have been confirmed, like super horizon scales in the CMB, for instance. So there's a ton of stuff it's predicted. And
super horizon scales in the CMB?
Yeah, that's these kind of these points being in contact with each other that shouldn't be able to be in contact with each other. So you should, when they looked at the power spectrum of the CMB, so that's sort of asking does the temperature of this have any correlation to the temperature of this part over here? Inflation predicted, if it was right, and it was actually predicted to explain different problems. invoked to explain why we don't have magnetic monopoles, but that's a different story. So that was why it was invented. And then one of the predictions of the theory was that you should find, once we get the technology to assess this, that parts of the universe that are so far apart from each other that shouldn't be in contact with each other will appear to have been in contact with each other. And that was then confirmed later on. So that was a real prediction of the theory. And an inevitable consequence, more or less an inevitable consequence of inflation, is this multiverse. So what do you do when you have a theory where much of it is scientific and credible, but of all of the predictions it makes, it happens to make one extra one, which is totally untestable, but is perhaps the most philosophically intriguing one of them all.
Untestable in what we know now, but eventually possibly testable.
Yes. I mean, this is where you get to kind of, invoke magic, invoke miracles. Yeah, I try to avoid invoking miracles because, that's part of science is let's think about what is, the bounds of what is known. But it's a pretty slippery slope, in my opinion, to invoke miracles and magic, because then just sort of everything goes, and then there isn't any science left at that point. Like you just say, you may as well be literally in a Tolkien world of Lord of the Rings at that point.
Yes. And I think about this one a lot, just because it is so theoretical and it's so trippy, and it can tie together a whole bunch of ideas, like you mentioned, simulation theory and all that. But it's like, what if you die in this dimension and you're spawned into another dimension from that, but it's only a year before you died, or 10 years before you died in another one, or 30 years before you died, or you're in a different set of circumstances. You were married to some girl in this one, you're married to a different girl in that one. It gets so weird. And I can imagine in the scientific community, when you have now taken like thread on a thread on a thread on a thread, they're like, wait. Slow down, stop. Because if one thread's wrong, the whole house of cards, like we're here, and it doesn't even make, you're at Terrence Howard. Like, you just went way far beyond where it was actually like provable or feasible.
Yeah. It's always hard as a scientist, because you're walking this fine edge between pushing the boundaries of knowledge and being open-minded to wild and speculative ideas. But at the same time, like the whole point of science is to have stuff which you can prove and show is absolutely right. And doesn't mean the other things are wrong, that it's not exclusionary in that sense. Sometimes it excludes things, but mostly we just want to know what is right and how the world works, to have rules that we can use in our lives, right? To use and to build stuff and to explore the universe.
Yeah, and I think like the way we label things also can rule out, like, I don't know, it almost create attitudes on how we view things. We were talking about it with labeling, 3-Eye Atlas as potentially alien, get some scientists to be like, shut the fuck up. But like, even when you say a word like alien and think about what that is, in our head, we think, all right, green man and spacesuit coming here in UFO. But then, what is the actual definition? Does it have to do with place, space, and time? Meaning, I've always looked at the movie Interstellar, and I look at Matthew McConaughey, and he leaves this earth at a given time at, age 40 something. I think he's gone for 2 years total. He comes back 85, 90 years later. Yeah. He is only aged 2 years, and the place he comes back to, which actually technically wasn't Earth, but let's assume it was literally Earth he came to. The people who were there are some of the same people he left, but they're in a completely different part of life, and it is a completely different reality than the lived time that he left and came back to. Yeah. So I look at Matthew McConaughey and I go, that's an alien. Yeah. You know what I mean? He's from a different period, a different time. So to the planet he's on, he's an alien. So when people start generalizing and saying like it has to be something from light years away, that's like a person or a green man or whatever. It's like, well, who's to say that there's not something that's been figured out in humanity to say, oh, there could be, some sort of future human or past human element that has figured out how to bend time. Like, is that crazy to think about, or am I also way too far in that theoretical den?
Yeah, I think certainly being a cultural alien is 100% right. Like, I think that's true. Like, you could definitely you travel to Japan, you feel like an alien. Like, you're just walking around. It's so different. And I'm sure they feel the same way when they first come over here. But the time travel thing's interesting. So yeah, I think forwards time travel is obviously trivially possible. And that's what Matthew McConaughey does. He travels forwards through time 90 years. To go backwards, that doesn't happen in that movie. And that's because Kip Thorne was one of the science directors behind that film, and he knows his stuff. And that causes a lot of problems to physics if that's possible. So a good example actually is wormholes. People often talk about wormholes as a possible way of going backwards through time. Even if you created two wormholes right here, one wormhole but two mouths, you could always put one mouth on a spaceship, travel super fast, close to the speed of light, and come back, and you'd offset them in time. So now you have a time travel machine. Okay, sounds good. But there's a problem here. So now you can have a particle, and this is something Stephen Hawking imagined. You can have a random particle, like a virtual particle even, that pops up, and it travels through one of the tunnels, like say A, and comes out in the past into B. And then it overtakes itself. So now at this point in space between these two mouths, I have a duplicate, a clone, two Matthew McConaughey's. And then those two now go through the mouth, and now there's 4. And now there's 8. And now there's 16. And it just keeps going. And because there's an infinite number of loops that can happen, you would end up with infinite amounts of energy in between the two. Even though there's only one particle, that one particle has now turned into an infinite amount of energy in between the two wormholes. And an infinite amount of energy, well, it doesn't even have to be infinite, but a large amount of energy will destabilize the wormhole. So the idea is that Stephen Hawking said that it's kind of like putting a microphone to a loudspeaker. You get like a feedback, that sound. The same thing happens with the two wormholes with these virtual particles. You get a feedback of this particle. And so that loud sound becomes an infinite amount of gravity, basically, that rips apart the two wormholes. So the moment you build a time machine, in this case, these two wormholes, it immediately destroys itself. The very second you activate it, it destroys itself. And so Stephen Hawking suggested, he gave the example there of the two wormholes, but he suggested this was a general rule, that whenever you build any time machine, the moment you turn it on, one of these effects will be ruinous. The universe just won't allow it to happen. And because if it did, it would kind of break the universe. And it's true, like if the universe was a simulation, you wouldn't want time travel to be allowed in that simulation.
Why not?
Because it would be, if you're running the simulation in real time, now you have to have a time machine in your real world to be able to account for the fact people are doing time loops in your simulation. And maybe that's not forbidden in their universe either. It would also allow for infinite amounts of memory for the same reason, right? Because now you could have 2 Matthew McConaughey's, 4 Matthew McConaughey's. So now you have to have an infinite amount of memory on the computer to handle the infinite versions of events that can happen. So it would very quickly destroy the computation, the memory, and even maybe the logic of their own universe that they operate in. So there's good reasons why, if you were designing a universe, you would not want that to happen. And then, of course, you can have paradoxes like grandfather paradox, where you kill your granddad or something, that just have no logical solution. So, like, how is the simulation supposed to proceed past that point?
Yeah, that was a point Michio Kaku made with like hypothetical time travel and stuff. He's like, if you went back to April 14th, 1865 to try to stop John Wilkes Booth, you're not stopping it in this multiverse. You're creating a new reality that's a separate
maybe
verse.
We don't know that.
We don't know it, but he's saying that exactly right.
That's one resolution. That's
Yes.
one resolution. The problem with that is now you have to create another whole universe. So now every time someone uses a time machine, it creates another universe.
Right.
And what's that? Because that's not an Everettian multiverse. That's not an inflationary multiverse. That's not a infinite space. It's another type of multiverse that you've just invented to explain this, to accommodate a time machine. So you have to have a lot of miracles work. Again, it's like, how many miracles do you need before breakfast to accept something being true? So I think for my money, I think time machines run into so many problems. Reverse time machines, they're probably not possible. Forward time machines, no problem. But going back, changing things in the past, I think is probably prohibited. Unfortunately.
Yeah, time travel is one of those ones I would talk about all day. We would stay on that a long time because there's so many possibilities.
We could go back to the start of this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. We'll go back. You can do it all over again. But one other thing I did want to talk to you about before you got out of here is this leaked memo that just happened with NASA for Project Athena. Have you seen this?
No.
Okay, Deef, can we pull this up? So the broad strokes are, I think a guy his name's Jared Isaacman. He's like,
oh yeah, he's going to be hopefully the next NASA administrator.
The head of NASA.
Yeah.
So this memo leaks where he's talking about how essentially, and I'm really broad brushing it here, they're going to create a more like incentivize the private industry to come in and basically work more hand in hand and get budget that way. Meaning like some of the private people like Elon Musk who are going to have $1 trillion could start contributing more without the government necessarily like creating a way bigger NASA. So you've mentioned today, this is why I bring it up, like that you have obviously had discussions with NASA and like it's something you care about and you've been around it. Like what needs to change there? I'm not saying this is the solution, but like what is the future here with the relationship between NASA, which is a government entity, and like the private people, like the Elons and the Bezoses and the SpaceXs, obviously owned by Elon, who are trying to run their own missions to get to frontiers in space.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlapping interests and reasons for collaboration, optimism there, I think. Yeah. NASA, I mean, a lot of people think NASA builds rockets, but it doesn't. I mean, it's always contracted out people like Lockheed Martin to build its rockets and other companies. So it's not like it's contracting out SpaceX is some novel thing. It's always done that. NASA is the contractor. They solicit the contracts and find the best vendor to deliver these services. So if the private industry can pull down those costs for whatever service it is, then I'm 100% in favor of that. I think the only anomaly here is this question of science funding. If you're doing fundamental science, like the origins of the universe, something like that, and you want a private investor to do that, you say, oh, it's okay, the private industry will solve the problem of the origin of the universe. They're not going to do that. There's no economic incentive. There's no possible investment you could imagine in a human lifetime that would give a positive return on your investment. It had to have to be philanthropy. That's the only reason you would do it. Maybe if we lived for thousands and thousands of years to come back to extended lifetime, maybe then we'd give a shit, because then we'd be like, well, in thousands of years we'll be traveling the universe, so then we actually need to know this shit. But and that's the whole point of science. Science is multi-generational. It's not all about answers that are going to solve problems. When all the discoveries of like Maxwell's equations and quantum physics were being discovered in the 1920s, no one had any idea we'd be using that to build iPhones one day. That's it's radical. So it's very difficult in a human lifetime to predict how investments in fundamental science are going to reap rewards, but they always do. They always lead to profound shifts in our society and technology as we increase our knowledge and development. So I'm a little bit worried about that. Like if we said, if NASA said or the government said, we're just going to let private industry do all the science, they would do a lot of science. There's still lots of science which is applicable in our everyday lives, like maybe healthcare stuff or vaccinations and drugs. You can imagine getting plenty of funding because that affects people in a day-to-day sense. But looking for exoplanets or trying to study another galaxy far away, that's just going to fall off the wayside. Like that's not going to be funded by anyone. Yeah. And I think I was having this conversation with a colleague the other day. Like, why do we do science? Like fundamentally, I don't think is that different from why we do art. Why do you play a musical instrument? Why do you watch Interstellar? Why do people make movies? Some of it's to make money, but some of it's just the human condition of wanting to engage in these activities because they enrich our lives. It'd be kind of a sad state of affairs if you just lived in a closed box room, you woke up, you ate food, you took a shit, and then you went to sleep and you woke up next day and you rinse, wash, repeat. And everything about your life was just about pure survival, economic benefit. That was it. Picking up a guitar and playing that in the middle of that day would enrich your life so much more. Drawing a painting, contemplating the size of the universe. These are things we do not because they are beneficial to our survival. So often they are as well. But fundamentally, I believe the reason why we do these things is because it's part of what makes us as being human beings. We're just animals if we're not doing that. We may as well just live like a rat. There's not anything else to our existence. So I think it's sometimes hard for private industry is so short term. They care about the quarterly stock revenue and the returns on the capital investments, all this kind of stuff, that it's difficult for me to imagine how private industry would invest in fundamental science. That's why government is the best place for it.
I'm thinking that there's got to be some beautiful balance to strike there. You know, I agree with you. If you just pushed it all onto the private side, you know, they're going to be tactically focused on the stuff that makes money right away and not in the discovery of it as well. But that also means government's got to take it seriously to be able to fund discovery of these things, and not just, you know, obviously there's always a fucking war to fight somewhere, so they're putting money towards that. But where do you make sure you keep that excitement you had for space that we had 5-6 decades ago that we lost there for a while? Now we're starting to get it back. How do we keep that going? How do we keep the next generations trying to find, like, I love that point you make right there, like the art in space and the interest of it. And I do think a big part of it is having communicators like you go out onto the mics, talk to people, talk through these things that are happening. I think that's a huge help, because somewhere a 15-year-old kid's listening to this right now. He's never fucking thought about it before. He's like, wow, it's really cool. I'm going to go look at this. And that's the power of the internet, you know?
Yeah. I mean, astronomy is a little bit like a gateway drug to science, right? You get into astronomy and you realize, like, holy shit, science is pretty freaking cool. And maybe you'll end up being an engineer or starting your own, you know, tech company or something. But sometimes that initial spark is just the wonder of something really fundamental and deep, and it leads to manifest other economic benefits down the road. But I think even without that, I'd still say let's do it, because it's the same reason why I like playing my guitar and reading books. It's like there's something about being human that has to be curiosity driven and wonder. And I think life's pretty empty if you don't have those things.
Agreed. What have you been doing on this sabbatical for the last half?
I'm trying to write a book, actually. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah. So I'm working on a book. It's questioning our place in the universe. Yeah. It's thinking about the case for alien life in the universe, the scale of the universe, historical examples of possible evidences, like K3 Atlas will probably appear in there, and mistakes we've made in those journeys in the past, and lessons to be learned, and perhaps even the case that the Earth might be more special than we realize.
When's this book coming out?
As soon as I write it, I guess.
So how far into it are you? Have you written any of it? Or?
I've written about a third of it, so I've got a ways to go.
Okay. Yeah. I feel like there's a few podcasts in there.
Yeah,
for sure.
Right, down the road.
So you've been all over in the UK, like doing this and designing it. That's nice.
Yeah, and doing science as well, of course, and making the Cool Worlds videos and the podcast, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, anyone wants to find me, head to Cool Worlds.
Yeah, we're gonna have your Cool Worlds link there. We'll also have any other social media linked as well. So let me know on that. Obviously, your channel's great. You've done some amazing podcasts in the past with a bunch of different people, including Joe Rogan and Lex Friedman. So it was great to have you in here, and thanks to Mark Gagnon for hooking this up.
Yeah, this is awesome. So much.
All right, enjoy the rest of your sabbatical, and I will see you again soon, sir.
Yeah.
All right, everybody else, you know what it is. Give it a thought. Get back to me. Peace. Thank you guys for watching the episode. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and smash that like button on the video. They're both a huge, huge help. And if you would like to follow me on Instagram and X, those links are in my description below.